Everybody ready to? Good evening. Welcome to the Thursday, March 21st, 2024 meeting of the school committee. We have just come from executive session, and I would ask for those who are here in the studio to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes. All right, so welcome. We have lots of people here in the studio, and just a reminder for those who are not aware, we are being recorded by HCAM for replay for those who are not able to view in real time. So the first item on our agenda here is public comment. Are there any people who are here to speak for public comment? Okay. Then that brings us into the Hopkins project update. Sure.
We have a presentation to share on screen too. I don't know if HCAM could arrange that.
There we go.
Awesome.
Welcome.
Well, thank you for having us. Really appreciate it. I brought a bigger team today, so you'll see some new faces in the room. So we're here to provide a status update on where we are on the Hopkins project itself. Tonight, our agenda is that we're going to, I'll first introduce our new partners, which is Commodore Builders, the construction manager you approved at the last meeting in February that I attended. Tonight's agenda, we're going to go over the schedule, their first approach on construction management plan, logistics, and phasing. They've been very busy at work over the last 4 weeks since getting on board in the project. Then Dan will present to you some exterior renderings, talking about how the project fits in the vocabulary of the existing building. And then I'll pick it back up with Commodore, and we'll talk about the current status of where we are at the cost estimate. With that, the team that you see is usually Dan and I, so Dan being from Perkins Eastman as your prime designer, and myself being your OPM at Vertex Companies. There's a whole host of design consultants that you don't see, which are on the right side of the screen there. But the new members that I want to introduce is the construction manager, so they will be a partner that you will see throughout the length of the project now. I'm going to turn it over to Bob to introduce his team.
Good evening. I'm Rob Blanchard, project executive with Commodore Builders. And then tonight we have Ricky Chagru. He's going to be the project manager on the project. In the audience we also have Jim DiMaggio and Scott Guerin. Scott is the senior estimator, and Jim is the vice president of the institutional group, public group in Commodore Builders. Ricky and I and Scott will be working together at length during the budgeting process and the drawing estimate process, and then eventually we'll get into the construction process, and the superintendent will join us after that.
So a lot of work for them to do once they get on board, and we've certainly made use of their time putting them through the ringer to get up to speed on where we are in the overall project. And so, one of the things we want to bring up to the committee is where we are in the overall cycle of the project. This project has made it through the design development stage, and with the gold bar vertically shows kind of where we are now in the beginning of Q2, just about. And so permitting started back at the beginning of Q1, where we met with Concom and got the extent of the wetlands locked in. We most recently this week submitted the actual plans for Concom and Planning Board to start reviewing and permitting. So we're excited to get back in front of the permitting boards starting next month and move the project along. With the completion of the design development, the construction management team has done an estimate, and we'll talk about that at a later part of the presentation, but the design team has kept moving. One of the nice things about this project is that the addition itself is small, and the renovations are more focused, so the design team was able to work swiftly through the overall design project. You're not handcuffed like an MSBA job that has a very long, protracted actual duration. This project is simple and straightforward, and allows the design team to kind of move forward on a steady pace. With that phase, we're also working into construction documents. Construction documents are really the details of the overall design, and so we have a milestone coming up on April 2nd where we approach 60% of the design, so the 60% construction documents. The overall design of the project will be completed by the end of June of this year, just to put that in perspective. What we're looking to do is to bring a number to town meeting at your annual town meeting in the first week of May, and we'll talk about the numbers and where they sit today and the work that we still have to do over the next month and a half to get ready for that duration. I'm going to let Ricky talk about the overall construction, because this is your first time to see the breakdown of that, and then that'll feed into the logistics plans you'll see following.
Yeah, so this is just a kind of a rough breakdown of the construction phases. We'll run through the phases a little later and what each one of those does look like during construction on your site. But basically, our goal is to kind of start out right around mid-July to kind of do some prep work and set up the site for the addition to start in early fall. And then that new addition will run all the way through to February 2026. At which point we will move into the renovation stage of some of the heavier renovation in that kitchen area, and then some of the heavy renovation in that second floor of the building. We do have the summers mixed in there as well. During those summer months, we are planning on doing the light renovations throughout the school. In the classroom areas, the areas where we're just replacing ceiling tiles and floors and that kind of thing over the summer 2025 and 2026, all the while working through the site. The bulk of the site work will happen during that first addition phase, and then with some of the final tie-ins happening in that summer 2026. You'll see what all that looks like when we run through the logistics.
So I figure once we go through the logistics, it probably makes more sense to open up to questions at that point, because it will likely answer a lot of what's on your mind.
So we do have a full construction management plan that kind of breaks down our whole process for everything, for the public safety, abutter coordination, mitigation measures, and the construction logistics. I don't think we need to get into a ton of detail here, but we can provide that plan to anybody, or if anybody has any questions. It's not the most exciting topic to run through. Starting with the access to the site, our plan is to get off 495 at Route 85 and access the site from that way to try to avoid any construction vehicles through Main Street and clogging up that area, just directing all the traffic kind of around that. And then when we do enter the site, our plan is to end for all construction access to kind of take a left on that loop road. And then we are planning to use that small one-way area for two-way access for construction vehicles. Obviously avoiding any pickup and drop-off times for access and deliveries. And then obviously doing this safely if we have to have flagging or directing traffic to do that. But our main goal is just to stay away from the school and keep all the construction vehicles away from that school and that parking lot and that loop road around the building.
So, yeah.
And we've also set it up so that the deliveries are not happening during drop-offs and pickups. So we strictly made the construction, the traffic management plan so that the any of the subcontractors will not be delivering any materials and moving the vehicles during drop-off and pickup.
All right, so we're working with the school department to determine like how many spaces we can free up for the contractors to park in the lower lot here or the upper lot here, and then accessing the site direct. And so all the traffic would not commingle with the school traffic.
So going back to that first enabling phase, this is what's going to be happening, and that's this summer, to just kind of get the space ready for construction. And our goal here is to get this north parking lot, or Page North parking lot, ready to use as parking, to use as parent drop-off, because we are going to have to take a small portion of the existing parking lot on the plan south. But our goal is to just, at a minimum, maintain the existing parking, and then also use a portion of that area for recess during the winter months or wet months, as well as provide a green space towards the north on the page in the left-hand side. Then you see the fence line is where we're going to be working on that new building addition, as well as putting in those geothermal wells. And this is essentially what the site is going to look like for that that first phase of the project that does run from September until February 2026, when that new addition will open up. So actually, there is a small phase in between.
Yeah, so there's lots of little sub phases, and
Yeah.
there's changes during the summer slammer duration. So the summer is when we take the most amount of effort, right, when the kids are off site to actually maximize that. So what Commodore is proposing here, and something that probably deviated from the first time we presented the phasing to you, is that because we're taking the existing blacktop off, I'm going to go back to the slide here. This is where the existing blacktop is, and that's important to the school to have an outdoor recess location in the winter months. So what they've proposed as part of their plan is that currently, once we take away that access road here, as you know, the parking lot has an extra access road there. to do the permanent parking early on and actually add another bay of parking here and then widen the loop to have more capacity for parents. And then this zone over here becomes the replacement blacktop area for students. And then the recess line itself is the field. We know it's tight, but we will work with the school to release it and take it during various portions of the schedule to try and maximize the amount of space the kids have available. At this early phase, the staff has the parking down in this lower portion here. I know bus traffic is very important and vital, right? You guys have a lot of buses that roll through, and so making sure we have appropriate queue space here. So these are things that we're studying at the moment. We certainly know we have the capacity here. We're contemplating whether we can pave over the shoulder here and to add a few more queue at the back of the line. And certainly we're looking to extend the end of the line. So the starting point would be brought down further so we have capacity. So this is a work in progress. It's the design team working with the construction team and the school department to understand all the most critical aspects of keeping your facility running.
So the next phase here is going to start in that summer of 2025, where we take the bottom of the page there and take over that existing teacher parking and develop the parking that you will see in the permanent condition. Again, our goal here is to maintain as much of the parking and at a minimum keep what you have now. And then we are planning to open the play space in the permanent condition at this point, so you will have access to that as the play space. So you will have access to that full parking lot in the top of the page there for the parent drop-off, as well as additional parking for that.
So we know these graphics are confusing, so we can always stop and explain it in greater detail. We only have one more to go, but essentially the asphalt at the top would be turned over. That would be the future parking lot with double stalls on either side. The playground area is this zone over here. You can see the cursor up to in the white zone here. And then blacktop is down here. So the students would have the whole use of that side of the site. Along the roadway itself, the parking that is currently a double-loaded drive aisle today becomes head-end parking along the roadway. So that's the portion here that's just beyond the dashed line that Ricky referred to that we would turn over. And so we kind of constrict, back to this orange fenced area, as well as the renovation portions that we would need to do in the building.
And then here's a brief look at the interiors, how we're going to be working through the building, mostly during the summer months. In that first summer of 2025, our plan is to really just tackle as much of the light construction as we can, which is really the classroom work and then some of that above ceiling MEP work that we have to get done. And our initial thought process is basically take half of the first floor and half of the second floor that first summer, so we have a little bit of areas for lay down spaces and to relocate furniture if need be. But really the goal here is going to be to get as much of that done as possible in that first summer.
Right, and so the viewers at home too, if it's hard to read the legend here, the purple is the heavier renovation, so that's where you're kind of marrying up the addition to the existing building. And so, changing wall layouts in order to connect to the addition is one of the heavier portions. But many of the rest of the building is the yellow and green, where it's the ceiling tiles and some of that other light work. And then there's the connection of utilities that is over off to the boiler room, which is, planned right here at one end, connecting to the addition on the other end. There's one more phasing plan.
That first summer, we'll be doing the elevator as well. The plan is to get that done in that first 10-week period in the summertime, because the second summer is going to be even shorter with inspections, so we want to get the elevator done in that first summer slammer.
And then lastly,
Yeah, and then this is the plan for the last summer. It's really going to be tackling that kitchen area where the auditorium is and that new janitor's, the new loading dock. That's going to be some of the more heavy construction. We are actually going to start that in February once we do turn over that addition. And then we're going to tackle the rest of the light construction and then probably the hallways and get that done in that last summer just prior to turning the building over in its entirety in fall of 2026.
and the purple zone here goes from the February break all the way through the summer. So the other yellows and greens are the summer work of true summer of 2026, but the purple zone, where it's the heaviest renovation of the project, occurs from February break to the start of school in the fall of 2026. So I know that's a lot of different graphics and many different layers. We can walk back through and take questions on that now, if it makes sense, or we can keep going with the other portions of the presentation.
Do people have questions you want to jump in with on this, or you want to hold till the end? Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I'll let Dan talk about how beautiful it's going to look.
Oh, yeah. So we've spent a lot of time looking at this building and trying to figure out how to knit the unique look of it to the addition, but not have the addition kind of just mimic it, because that's not really what we wanted it to do. We wanted it to kind of, pay homage to it, but be its own thing. And what we've ended up with is a little bit different than I think the last time you saw it. I think last time you saw it, it might have had peaked roofs in the front, a little less splashes of color, and then like a medallion on the top of the windows. And we kind of decided that since there's a lot of different patterning and a lot of different colors going on with the existing building, and a lot of different patterns and a lot of different colors going on with the modulars that will eventually come over and be the bookends to the addition, that it made a lot of sense to bring some of those, more of that language into the elevation of the new, like with the kind of matching the brick colors and the matching the patterning to try to make them look like they belong together. And pitching that roof back, instead of having it be a peak, now it's a hip, more like what they have there now. So we felt that the language of this version was a lot a lot better as opposed to what we had shown before. We think this is really an improvement and I think it'll harmonize a lot better with the existing building. So we wanted you all to see where we're at with it and get any feedback you might have about it. But right now this is where we're landing on what we feel is the right kind of palette and look.
So the image here on the left here is the existing building. You can see some of the material on the top is a different material, but in the same color shade. And then on the right side is how the Perkins team has responded to that with all the descriptions that Dan just provided. And then this is kind of stepping back, zooming out. So off to the left here is that existing building. This is the entirety of the addition on the parking lot side. And this is that modular that mimics the modular that's out there today on the back side of the building. And how it kind of works in that bookend that Dan noted. So really trying to work with the vocabulary of both buildings.
Can I ask about the roof line? Just, is there any impact on the efficiency of any future solar based on how you pitch the roof? Or I'm not sure what direction this building faces or where we would put that.
The building, the long elevations are north-south.
Okay.
So the short ones are the east-west sides.
Okay.
So right now, there is solar on it. It's on the south side and on the west side, primarily. We would anticipate that you would probably flood the gym
Right, that flat.
on
yeah.
the bigger, higher roof here.
Yeah.
And then there's a well in here, but that needs to be studied as to whether or not that makes sense to put any. You do not have any panels in, I don't think you have any in the well now, which is the peak roofs, and then there's panels on the peak roofs. But there's actually a well inside there where the units are. So those are false frame.
Okay.
And I don't think there's any panels in there. So the panels are really, they're on the asphalt shingle roofs on that east side. So there's our run of asphalt shingle roof is pretty small, but again, it's gonna come down to the design. Like if the vendor feels that, yes, they wanna take advantage of that space, then you'd probably see panels on that east hip or that east part of the roof and then the entirety of the gym.
Any questions on the elevation?
I didn't have any questions specifically on the look and feel of it. I mean, I think it looks great. But the question that comes to mind for me is with any outdoor roof structural issues that we may have had with Hopkins in the past, are we fixing that as
So
part of this?
we-
Or avoiding something similar?
So with Hopkins, we have replaced the roof. So we have solar panels on the new roofs.
Okay.
So it was the middle school that really had the solar,
Now the high school, it was the
Roof
gym.
issue.
Yeah,
so not Hopkins. So the Hopkins roofs have been replaced.
got it. Okay.
So next we're going to get into cost. So over the arc of the project, there's many milestones, as you saw in the opening schedule. And so we go through schematic design, design development, do an estimate at each milestone. The estimate we have tonight is the end of the design development. We're going to be doing another one next month at the 60% construction document phase. And each time, the contractor or independent estimator are responding to what the designer puts on there. It's a refinement, and it's always a work in progress. I just want to set the table as to kind of where we are in the overall process. This is also the construction manager's first look at the project. They bring a lot of knowledge and insight to the project, so historically their estimates are always a tick higher than ours anyway at this juncture because they're getting familiar with where the project is. They're turning over and asking questions that we may not have asked, and it's a collaborative process as we go through that. And so there's been a lot of dialogue over the last couple of weeks about, what are the right numbers for things, the complexity of them. Is it a simple thing, or is it a complex thing, and what's the right value we should assign to that? And so I just want to set the frame for that as we go through this. But we understand that a number needs to go to town meeting in May, and we're really narrowing in on that number over this month and next month, and we'll have more updates. But tonight is a real update on where we've been over the last couple of months and kind of where we are at this exact moment in the life cycle of a project. Scott, want to go up?
I'm going to turn it over to Scott Guerin, the senior estimator on this project.
So just before I let Scott speak, kind of to date, we've appropriated the $3 million for the full design phase, and that carries us through bidding. The goal is to bring a number to town meeting that is for the construction phase of the project. And right now, that's running at a current estimate of about $49.5 to $50.5 million for total project costs. So that's the construction number you'll see from Scott, as well as soft costs, which I'll get to after Scott speaks.
All right, thank you everybody for having us. Just to give you a brief description, we priced the DD budget, DD design drawings over the last couple of weeks since we got brought on board. And we basically developed an estimate based on those documents of about $42,500,000. As you see at the total at the bottom of the spreadsheet. We broke our estimate down into various estimates by doing the addition as one cost estimate at $19,999,000, and then the renovation portion of the project at $14,516,000. Then we also break out our estimate based on the site work because that's an important component, and so the site of the project is about $7,066,000 for a total construction cost of $41,582,000, and then we have some design construction contingency added to that for a total project budget of $42,520,000 for construction.
So thanks, Scott. So we know there's a lot of questions about the cost per square foot of the addition, cost versus the renovation, kind of how the site fits in there. And the site also has some of the geothermal numbers in it, which is why that site number looks higher in relation to the size of the addition itself. And so, we're going to talk a little more about that. But, I also want to remind the committee of where the project fits in terms of the overall projects in the state, because I think that's a good anchor point for the public at home. It was an important point when we moved forward with the Elmwood project, and it's always good to understand where we fit in the spectrum. And so what I did here is I pulled the data from the MSBA's website yesterday to kind of show where we're at. And I know you can't read this at home, and you probably can't read this in the room, but the point is that it shows the trend, right? And that over the past 15 years of data that the MSBA has collected, this particular slide is new construction, and I'll get into reno on the slide after this. It shows that the cost is just creeping up, and as we understood at Elmwood, getting more and more steep as it goes through. And so over the last year, all the projects that have submitted for an MSBA project range from $700 to $1,000 a square foot, which is very expensive. We understand that, and that's a challenge to all the districts. Now, the beautiful thing about the town of Hopkinton is that the school building committee and the Elmwood project really understood that it wasn't just solving the Elmwood project, but that the Hopkins was coming after, and there were many other challenges and needs on the taxpayers, and so that they needed to be on that project as appropriate as possible in terms of the fit and finish of the building. So the building committee took a lot of time to look at the finishes of the building, to pick items that were cost efficient, and to drive the overall cost of the Elmwood project down, because they understood the broader picture that the Hopkinton Public Schools are going under with Hopkins and other needs. And so the Elmwood project is the one right at the bottom here. So Elmwood is at 715. There's only one other project that's in the range of where we were. And so that shows you that of all the projects that are out there in the MSBA pipeline, Hopkinton understands the value of a dollar. And you really took the time on that project to push the cost down and to have an economical, appropriate design for the town. Now, the beauty of the Hopkins project is you carried the same team over. And so by having Vertex as your OPM and Perkins as your designer, in the school, all that institutional knowledge transferred over. So we're not in the user group meetings for Hopkins throwing it against the wall and seeing what sticks, right? We're taking that same mindset that money matters and every dollar counts and really driving the overall cost of the building. And so you see on the addition that Scott presented that our dollars per square foot of the addition are also at that low number, right? It's a small addition. There's not a lot of square foot to spread that around, but we're being very economical on the dollars per square foot for the addition itself because we understand the dollars matter and trying to be judicious with how we do it. Dan also presented you the exterior facade that is a complementary to the existing building. You know, Hopkinton has a history of finding durable, cost-efficient products. That's brick. Many of the schools you're seeing now are having metal phenolic panels and glass and glazing and giant curtain walls and real splashes. That's not what this town does, right? We find economical decisions and we follow through with them. And so that same vocabulary was done on Elmwood and the marathon before that and has continued on to Hopkins. So that's why you, on both these projects, are at that low end of the scale when compared to all the other new projects that are going on in the state right now. Now, the database on ad renos is a lot thinner with the MSBA pipeline. Many reasons, because those projects that go there tend to be end of life and have a lot of phasing complications with it, so many of those projects do end up being new construction, but there are a lot of ad renos that are in there. I have asked the MSBA for a breakdown of this data because I do want to bring back to the committee, what's the ratio? Is it a 30% renovation and 70% new, or is it the inverse, right? Because that draws a better understanding of how these numbers fit. But the most recent three are 650 to 750 to 1,000, right? And the couple before that were at the 700, but one was down low at 500, right? And so you're back again to yours, you're at 400, right? So I want to drive home the point that although it feels high at $42 million, you know, there's a lot of efficiencies in this design when it comes to the overall cost of it. What does that mean to where we are today? So when I last presented numbers to you in November, we were tracking at a total estimated project for $46,743,000, which inclusive of the $3 million was just under $50 million, previously approved $3 million. Where we are now is that that $3 million stayed the same, and so the overall cost of the project at the current estimate is up over $3 million, and we'll get into the why in just a moment. It's mainly related to the construction dollars as the design team, the construction team, and us respond to the things that are going on around us and continually refine the overall scope of the project. And then, as we know, the modulars were always at a later date. I did tick that number up a hair to include some landscaping around it. When we previously presented it was the cost to kind of move that over, but we'd want to trim it out with some trees, so there's just a plug number in there for that as well. What's changed, right? That's always the question that you guys want to know and is the right question to ask. So we've met with the permitting groups. We had our initial meeting back in January. The design has revolved and refined. We ended up with a larger stormwater recharge system. There's also been changes to the generator, went for a larger generator at this point. Currently, we have an additional electrical service here that we're going to talk about in a minute when we get to value engineering. So it's because of the size of the building and the demand of it, there's a potential we might need an additional duct bank and splitting off the transformer. That may go away, which I'll talk about in a second. We're also doing a full fire alarm upgrade, some enabling costs, as you saw in the logistics plan for summer 24, so starting a little bit earlier to try and get some of that messier pavement work done before the teachers return back for school. Some floor pipe and other items associated with that. Site work and some ledge allowances, some acoustical treatments, and some additional winter conditions and other safety and temporary systems that the contractor revises as best practices, which we tend to agree with as well. Some other upticks with overall soft cost. The cost of the town to insure the building is going up. That's an outfall of COVID in general. They used to be able to get builder's risk policies very cheaply, and that's not the case. And because you have Maya as your insurer, they don't carry the building itself when you're doing a project. So this project also has to take on insuring the existing building, not just what we're touching. And so that's a reason for an uptick. And then utility back charges for that service, a little bit more for commissioning and a little bit for FF&E and technology. For FF&E, I didn't include it in your packet, I will send you a supplemental. We did 3 levels of furniture in terms of, what's the minimum you need for the spaces that we're touching, what's the nice to have that kind of fits out, and then what would it look like if you replace the whole building. We are carrying the minimal. It's just the areas that we're touching, the additional spaces we're adding, and where we have to expand. And so we are being economical with the FF&E as well. And then the construction is a factor of a percentage update. So because the construction costs went up, the contingency went up as well, and that's an item that I will dial in before we get to the final number to go to town meeting, but I allowed it as a calculation at this point. So going up $3 million is never good news, right? We have work to do, and we're committing to do that work. And so I wanted to talk to you tonight about what we're doing to do that. So next steps in the overall process are investigation when it comes to a renovation allows us to tighten up all the numbers so we can get the best estimate in front of you. So if you'd been out there over a month ago, we did a geothermal test well. We actually drilled the 500-foot well and tested the thermal conductivity of that. That report came back this week, and we now know we can reduce by 5 wells and still maintain the demand that we need. So that's a 6-figure number that we can save on the project. So those are real dollars. We're looking to do test pits over April vacation to identify the limits of the ledge. Right now, the ledge kind of creeps up to the building. If we identify limits, we can take out the allowances that we've added to the overall project. The CM has just been brought on board, but they're not going to take a breath, right? They're really going to dig in and take a deeper dive on phasing and logistics to understand how they can tighten up their numbers to be the right number that we bring back to town meeting. There's other items that are out there that we could afford to not do, which is there's a shade structure that exists today on the site, so we had put that in there as a replacement structure, but that's something that could be in the nice to have should money be available at the end of the project. So we're going to look at opportunities for value engineering for that. We're going to take a harder look at the site work package. The design team is already working with Eversource to see whether we can maintain and service the addition of the existing electrical feed and not provide that secondary duct bank and transformer. So there's a lot of dollars with excavation piping associated with that. And then lastly, we're looking to reuse the sprinklers themselves. Right now we're only replacing the main, and we have an ability to kind of relook at that and tighten the numbers up. On the soft cost side, we're actively getting quotes from the builder's risk, so I can bring a tight number to town meeting. Like I said, we're talking to Eversource, and we're soliciting 3 quotes from commissioning agents, and then I will reduce the overall contingency as we go through the next estimate cycle. So I wanted to explain to the committee where we are in the overall process and kind of what's next. So just in sum, before I open up for questions, where we were, where we are, $3 million has been appropriated. Our current construction estimate is $42.5 million. Our total soft costs outside of that $3 million is just under $8 million for the FF&E contingencies and OPM and designer fees for construction phase. It brings us to about $53.5 million. Already you've appropriated $3 million from the previous design phase, and there's $850,000 appropriated last year for the mechanical equipment upgrades. All that scope is being folded into this project. It makes sense to do it now economically when you have a bigger, better buy with the construction manager. IRA and mass save is a big number, but it comes after the fact, and that's something we have to educate the public on, just like you did with Elmwood, that you have to appropriate the bigger number at the bottom, but you can get a substantial rebate back. I put the footnote here that's the potential of $1.3 million to potentially $2 million back in mass save in the IRA. Mass save is a more tried and true process, as we've talked about on Elmwood. The IRA is a program that's out there that everybody's going after, but the feds have committed to these metrics. And so that may change 2 years from now, but that's why we put the range. But with everything we know now, we think this is a safe range to put out there for those rebates that are coming back. So if you took away the existing funding today, ignored those rebates, the potential town meeting request is $49.63 million before the VE items that we just discussed with the committee. So that concludes our presentation. I'm happy to take any questions and talk.
Thank you. Questions?
With the generator changes that we're talking about, is that an additional generator to accommodate the addition, or is it replacing the generator that's there so that it's big enough for the whole building?
You want to take that one, Dan?
It was,
Both. We've examined both.
yeah, we've done both. It was a new generator to service the addition only. And through conversations and looking at how the building functions, right now, the existing generator is set up and basically it powers the entire building. So when power goes down, the whole building just lights back up. And that's inadequate because it was designed for that building, and since it's designed at that maximum load with everything on it, that is not enough when we add the new building to it or the new addition. But through looking at how this is all gonna go work, it turns out that adding a bigger generator, which is, I think the one there is a 325 kilowatt, and this one would be 450. You can power both things, including the new kitchen, which is all electric, and all the equipment. So the other problem with the generator there is once we make the kitchen all electric and we add the all electric
It's not gonna
HVAC
support it.
things, if you're at max in the existing building, now you've got a different problem because the unit that's there won't even power everything that's connected to it. So from a design perspective, it made much more sense to upscale the generator that is there and take a generator that is there now, which I think will be about 15 years old when this is done, and that can go elsewhere. So that could go to another place.
Oh, within the school system?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question about the logistics, the front piece with the loop road and all of the traffic that goes on the loop road. I guess this is going to be a challenge, I think, managing. And one thing that comes to mind is when we have, I know you're avoiding dismissal and arrival times, but when we have athletic events, the parking is typically all along that, it cinches in the width of the loop road significantly because there's nowhere to park. We have a great turf field. So I'm definitely concerned about this particular top path and making sure that that's passable for parents and students who are driving, as well as the trucks that need to get in and out. There just aren't a lot of access points. There's only one way in, one way out. So I'm hoping that you factor that in. I definitely appreciate the phasing and accommodating recess and parking. It's a whole lot. So I don't know, when you look at the soft costs and you talk about things that or the costs you could maybe reduce, I doubt you're gonna find a lot of ways to cut the logistical management of this space. I think to me that's a huge challenge, but I don't know if you factored in even the condition of the loop road to accommodate the trucks. I mean, I know we've put off paving for a bit, but I'm a little nervous about the logistics.
Yeah, I mean, the red arrow here is the two-way portion of it, so it has that overswing for the trucks that are getting in, and the deliveries would happen at blackout time, so not when pickup and drop-off is happening, so the construction managers are responsible for making sure that they get the message to all the delivery drivers and, and deal with the repercussions if they're not following through on that. The goal is to have it on the two-way road where it's least impactful to the Hopkins project itself, where you have the parents kind of picking up and backing up, pick up and drop off there in that non-colored zone here. The workday, they're done by 3:30, so chances are that all the after-school activities are not an issue, and they wouldn't be leaving with the big trucks at that point. It's the personal vehicles that you'd be seeing leaving the site at that particular juncture of the project. And then if they are delivering like heavy equipment, like a crane delivery or big excavators, those are done in off hours times. Like a lot of times they get dropped off on a Saturday, and that could be scheduled as those few infrequent things happen.
When you were saying just too about pickup and drop off, I think there isn't really pickup and drop off at the high school, but there is busing going in and out, and all the students going in and out of the loop road from. The students are parking all the way down into that corner. So your dismissal times are gonna be twofold, because it's gonna be the high school and it's gonna be Hopkins, which you may have already accounted for. But the other question that you made me think about was, we have close neighbors in Sanctuary Lane, and so thinking about how early in the morning you're starting with big trucks back there, maybe another thing that we have to think about. So, because Sanctuary Lane is like
Right there.
right there.
Right there, yeah.
We have our start time at 7 a.m.
And we've talked, we've already discussed the noise and the neighbors, so
Yeah,
that's been a discussion.
Yeah, the contractors have to abide by whatever's in the planning board submissions, and that follows the town guidelines, which is work no earlier than 7 during the week. And so that's where they'll have to follow.
Jack, I'm curious from a student driver perspective, do you have any comments on timing of, when things start to pick up for students on the Loop Road?
I mean, like, throughout the day, you're not going to see a lot of traffic. Like, if they avoid the pickup and drop-off times of the high school, that's, like, mainly when you're going to see it. But you might have problems with, like, students will be walking down there, especially, like, to H and J, J-Lot and K-Lot, all the way down there. So you might experience some just, like, students on the sidewalk. But other than that, I would say, like, the main times are normally pickup and drop-off times as well. I don't think many people make the walk down to J and K just to leave for like a study or something. So.
And for practices or things that happen right at dismissal, when kids drive down to the fields, there's usually parking enough for students.
Yeah.
On a non-game day.
On a non-game day, it'll usually be like 1 or 2 teams will have practice there, and so that'll involve only the seniors will have to drive down. So that's like a select group of kids. I'd say it would be about like 20 kids maybe if there's 2 teams parking there, but generally if there's just one, it's just going to be like a group less than 10 kids. So, and you don't always drive down. So
They make the younger classmen go down to the
Like
swamp
Kayla,
area.
right?
So I had a couple of things, and I would be remiss if I didn't say my overarching concerns are at this point really about the overall cost. So, and I know there's lots of movement still that we're hoping to see between now and town meeting, but after we had our little working session, was that last week?
Last week.
Feels like longer ago. We talked about some of the potential alternatives if this does not pass town meeting. And the alternatives did not seem good for the district, good for our students. So I want to make sure that what we come forward with at town meeting, we're able to bring through to something the voters can support. So in that vein, my questions are mostly around that. If I'm understanding the cost of the insurance is shifted to then this budget for during the construction, and Maya's not going to insure the building, correct?
That's correct.
So does the town then appreciate any significant savings on that? I don't know what the cost the town is paying on insuring our
Not
buildings.
much.
Okay.
I've asked that in other towns, and I've never got a real good answer on it, but I've
Okay.
never seen the money come back.
Okay, so that, and then in terms of the generators, this is maybe a Susan question first, how many of our buildings have generators that can power basically all the functions? I know there are buildings that do not because we've had to close schools.
Hopkins is actually the only building that powers that the generator powers the whole building. But that is a function of how the generator is hooked into the electrical room. And the experts can speak to it better.
Okay.
But the electrical panels, if you will, are not sectioned off that the generator can only power this piece because
Okay.
that's not how the electrical room was designed. So we don't have the opportunity to say, okay, well, let's only do this, because that would be a significant change in electrical rewiring. And Dan could speak to
Well
it
said.
Okay.
better.
Yes,
That's about right on. Yeah, that's.
So, but Hopkins is the only building that is designed that way. It's the only building that fully lights up.
Is it possible, and not saying that this is desirable, but is it possible to keep the generator doing what it does, since you can't separate it out, in the old portion of the building and not have generator power in the new section?
Well, there's 2 issues. One being
Yep.
that if you leave it at the old building, it's gonna tax it when the switch over to the new mechanical equipment, that's the greener equipment, that's more all electric based, and the new kitchen, which is more all electric based. So as you shed gas load, you increase electrical load, and the way the building is set up, as Susan just said, is basically like there's a plug into the building. And that the reason why was it was less expensive to cordon off all those different electrical loads to create, like you just would light emergency lighting only and things you need, which is more common. But this building, you just, it goes right into the switchgear and powers the whole building straight up. And so we'll exceed more than likely that load.
Okay.
And that creates this issue.
Okay, that helps me a lot, because I was thinking in the scheme of the world, having generator power may not be the number one thing, but I see why we can't.
This is there was a lot of thought here, because we were thinking the same. We were like, well, could we just save the existing generator and just leave that? And the original design had a second generator over by the addition. If you don't have a support for the addition, then you have other issues. You have batteries and other things to try to create the emergency lighting situation. It's not great. So you really do want a generator as the backup. But there was a lot of that. Ultimately, the tipping point was the new equipment pushes the old generator past or the existing generator past its ability.
And what is the order of magnitude of cost that we're talking about in this generator line item?
Well, that's still kind of an open question, because the order of magnitude and cost, I think is it $500,000?
About $550.
So, but that doesn't right now include the idea that it seems that if we do this, we then may be able to get rid of the second power run. So one of the issues that was driving us to creating a second power run, or having two services, was because of this generator issue. And once we solved the generator issue this way, the engineer said, well, I think I can solve the power issue now. So there'll be a deduct for the duct bank and the second transformer, pad, bollards, all the things that support a transformer, and the costs from Eversource, because they don't have to come and do a second service.
Okay,
So
so a
there's-
maximum of $500,000.
So, yeah, at the end of the day, I think that savings on the other side is a six-figure number too.
Okay. Thank you.
A lot of six-figure numbers together, though, make some really
A
good
lot of
seven
six
figures.
figures save something, yeah,
Yeah.
that's correct.
Okay. All right, so that I think is I can hold with that, because I know there's more to come on all of this. Anybody else have?
The only other question I had, I noticed the fire alarm replacement. For something like that, is there ever grant money available to maintain that type of safety and security equipment?
I haven't seen anybody get a grant for that.
Okay.
And the fire alarm was another one that was studied at length to see if there was a way to, but as we kept trying to figure out how to keep it,
Yeah.
it kept telling us, it was saying, I can't stay here. And we kept trying to say, can you stay, because we need you to, we don't want to replace all the fire alarm.
Right,
But
right.
at the end of the day, from a code perspective and the way it's geared up, it's just not, it's not a fire alarm of 2024, it's a fire alarm of 1998.
So I have some information that will also be helpful to the committee. And this is information that I was throwing to the town a couple of months ago, so they've heard this. We have some projects that have, didn't go full, all the way through their full closeout, but came in under budget. So similar to the building of Marathon that came in under budget, that debt was reauthorized in a different way. So you have the high school addition that came in under budget, $465,000. The roof replacement at $405,000. Elmwood feasibility, which was funded by the school reserve, we received MSBA reimbursement for that. So the MSBA reimbursement of that feasibility study came in at $353,000. And the Marathon edition, again, not full, through full closeout, is $434,000. So you have the potential of 1.6 million of debt that could be reauthorized towards this project. So just something else to keep in mind as we're looking at the number.
What is the reauthorization process?
Right.
So town meeting has already authorized this debt for these projects. You can't take debt that's already been borrowed or
something.
designated for one project and just move it over. But that's already been something that the taxpayers have voted on. So rather than just give the debt back, it could be reauthorized towards this project. So it lessens the tax impact for the community.
But who's the authorizing body? Is it town meeting? Does it have to
Town
go back?
meeting,
So
it would go to town meeting. So I believe this would be part of the motion document
Okay,
as to how this would be funded.
so we have that sort of being sketched out for this year's town meeting.
Well, I've kind of pushed some information forward, but I will continue to push that, but that's just something for you to have also for
When?
information. And I will bring this up Monday also for appropriations.
How long do you have to reappropriate? I mean, there's gotta be like an expiration date on some of those projects, right? Like where, like if you haven't used the funds or reappropriated, that they expire?
I believe at town meeting, they do reauthorize debt somewhat regularly for projects that have been closed out.
Okay.
Yep. So this is not an unusual process. We're just asking for our project's debt to be reauthorized toward another school project.
But let's say like we didn't have this project going on. With that debt that hasn't been used, if we didn't make a motion to reauthorize it, what happens with it?
The town would either reappropriate it to somewhere else, lessen their debt borrowing on something else.
Okay.
So potentially the town has other money to move around to other projects for, I know this is outside of your scope, because it's, I'm thinking of some of the recent, the DPW building, the library might also have money that they could reappropriate to other things as well.
Yeah, I don't know where they are.
I'm just curious about it.
Yeah.
It is comforting that we have a good track record of coming in generally, under budget with a lot of these projects. I think that is comforting when we see the numbers. We can have some confidence that we'll hit that, even if we don't love them, we're fairly confident, except for the little anomaly we had with COVID and the marathon edition. I think that was a one-off, but generally speaking, we do very well, so.
Well, and it does speak to the caution around contingencies.
Yeah.
You have contingencies for a reason, and this allows you to take what would have been contingencies within projects and, save that money.
Yeah.
So,
All right, thank you. Great to meet the larger team, so.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Last thing I want to note is we do have a couple of community forums coming up because it's, I know there's many viewers watching us live right now, but we do want to get beyond that. So we're putting a flyer out via listserv of the school for April 3rd and April 30th. So those are the dates that we're looking to have a hybrid type of presentation, so people can come in person. I think April 3rd is here, I believe. And then, to get both people in the audience, and we'll have a Zoom so people can ask questions. We had great participation at the first one via the multiple avenues, and we wanted to repeat that as well.
Great.
So tune in for people at home, April 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we ever make our own posters for the tennis courts on those things?
Oh, like the banner.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly see that more than I see anything else, is like when you're driving by, because you know how many trips we're driving our kids back and forth and you read those things.
Yep. Not a bad idea. All right, so that brings us in item B, which is the Hopkins Education Fund. You need to slide down.
Okay. All right, so in your packet tonight, you have the Hopkins Education Plan. I believe we saw it for the first time back in January, but the committee has not formally voted on it. If you just take a quick look at the table of contents, you can sort of see everything that is outlined in there. We talk about our vision and mission statement in the Hopkinton Public Schools. We take a look at the Hopkins School as currently built, the appropriate number of students in the way the school is currently constructed is about 628 students. We are looking at class size policies, how we would be scheduling grades 5 and 6 should the 6th grade move into Hopkins. We talk a lot about our methodologies in terms of delivering curriculum in our schools. We talk about the administrative and academic organization. And then there's a lot that you'll see in there about the related arts, and that happens because currently grade 6 has more related art opportunities than grade 5. And so we're thinking about what that would look like if we brought those related arts opportunities down to grade 5. We do look at special education programming, food service delivery. As we know, the cafeteria and the servery in the current Hopkins is very small. The health office will be moving. We opened the building, we had 1 nurse and about 426 students, and today we have 689 students, and we have 1 full-time nurse and a floater nurse who's there quite frequently. In terms of grade level configurations, we also think about extracurriculars. And that is really the content of that document. I don't think a lot has changed since we took a look at it in January, but I'm happy to entertain any questions that the committee might have.
Thank you. Questions?
I think it's well done.
I think my only question was, what has changed, if anything, because I couldn't tell. But if there really hasn't been changes, then I don't have any questions.
You mean from the first time we saw it?
Yeah.
There hasn't changed, has it?
No, not much. I don't think anything has changed. We may have gone through and just updated numbers and those kinds of things because maybe in January, definitely in January, we're not at 689 students. But we did go back through and give it a careful read and make sure that, all of the scheduling pieces were accurate.
I think the two things we talked about last time, or the first time we saw it, were the ways in which this education plan drives the space and drives the headcount costs. Mm-hmm. And I think we had the great opportunity last week to walk through Hopkins and really get into the project and get a feel for the space, the new music space, the physical education space, and feel the space and also see the need for it. And then we also talked about the head count being a sort of a net, like 1.5, I think it was FTE roughly, to cover the related arts, strictly to bring sort of the more students into some of the related arts. And I think those are the two things that we had discussed last time. So I think, me personally, I think the plan looks great. I'm very comfortable with the spaces that we've designed. I don't think we've gone overboard, but I think we've accommodated the new science, technology, engineering, and math, right, to get the right STEM, right, the new STEM DESI curriculum, more hands-on, experiential sort of labs and things that we want our students to do. I think our classrooms, as we've designed them, support this plan, and the plan is driven by modern learning standards and DESI, so I think that makes sense for me personally. I think it looks good.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the
Thank you
things
for the
we
work
always
on
say
that.
about the related arts is, they feel like I wonder if some people perceive them as nice to have, but when we think about things like engineering, that is part of the core Massachusetts science, technology, engineering frameworks. And so those are the kinds of things that realistically our kids are MCAS tested on. And so when you build spaces like that, you're building them because we have to have them. And when you look at the design of the building, which I'll show you some pictures later this evening, you'll see that the band and the chorus and orchestra spaces had to be enlarged. And I think Hopkinton is a community that has prided itself on those kinds, on our arts and on our music programs. So I think that we're delivering on that. You'll also see that 30 is a little bit of a magic number. So currently we have 16 fifth grade classes and 14 fourth grade classes. And if you're a related arts teacher, so you teach PE or art or music, you can only teach 30 sections in a week. You teach 6 periods a day, 5 days a week. So if you get to that 31st section, you have to hire another person. And so I think people are wondering, are you bringing on additional FTEs because you're offering things, or are you bringing on additional FTEs because your student enrollment is growing? And it's really about 1.5 FTEs for the additional offerings, but all of the rest of it is really just student enrollment growth.
Yeah, but even if you hire that extra person, you don't have the space for them.
Yes, at this point in time, we don't have space for them, which is why you'll see 2 art classrooms. There are 2 art classrooms because once you get past that magical number of 30, you need another space to put the teacher in.
And the 1.5 is the total.
Correct, yes, not 1.5 per discipline, but 1.5.
Right, I just,
Yes.
it was like, I wanted
Thank
to
you for
clarify,
that.
I think that more for the viewers
Yes.
at home, so.
Yep.
Okay. Anybody else have comments or questions, or anybody feel like they would like to make a motion with regard to the education plan?
I'd like to move to approve the Hopkins education plan.
Okay, so motion by Susan, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Lori, all those in favor?
Aye.
It sounds unanimous, so that passes. Thank you for all the work that went into that. That brings us then into the accept collaborative agreement.
Okay, thank you. So as you know, we are one member district in the Accept Education Collaborative. And so the board began reviewing this document in December. It has been vetted through DESE, so we sent it off to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to make sure that it fits all of the roles, rules, and responsibilities of a collaborative. I think the big piece that is a change in this particular agreement is that the Accept Collaborative has now taken Westboro as a school district into the collaborative. And so really when we all sign this document, that will be the major change to it, is that Westboro is now a community who's also part of Accept. And that's not an easy application process. They, have to apply probably a year in advance, and then it will take more than a year before they actually become voting members. They can come and attend the meetings, but it takes a little bit for them to get there.
Any questions on that? Okay. Is there somebody who would like to make a motion relative to the Accept Collaborative Agreement?
I move to approve the updated Accept collaborative agreement.
Motion by Susan, is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Lori, all those in favor?
Aye.
And that is unanimous, and so passes. Thank you for bringing that back. And that brings us into policy KHCB, which is dissemination of literature. Dr. Kavanaugh.
All right, thank you. So you can see that this is under new business, so this is a policy that the policy working group has just taken up. It was last revised in March of 2016, and really this is a housekeeping issue. Most of what the schools put out now in terms of dissemination of literature or information is really digital, so we wanted to underscore that we're really not doing paper anymore and that what we put out there is digital. In the third paragraph, we also made a correction because it says flyers may be posted on the district website with the approval of the superintendent. We really don't put any flyers now on the district website. Certainly, our building principals will post flyers that go out in their newsletters, and so that's an easy way for the community to access that information, but it doesn't go on to the district website. And we also eliminated the sentence that said, on rare occasions, the superintendent or their designee may allow for a school support organization to distribute paper flyers for grades pre-K to 5. And so we have eliminated all of those paper flyers as well. But other than that, no big changes.
Okay.
It's like we put in place a green policy on literature.
It's very green, yes.
Anything from the policy working group that you guys want to add to the conversation on that?
No, I don't think so.
Because it's a first policy, I know it seems like there's really nothing in this particular change that would be controversial. Typically, we don't approve after first reading. I'm comfortable bringing it back to another meeting if you guys are comfortable with that. I also could be persuaded to move it along since it's this is the practice that we have going on already.
I think I would, I don't think it's controversial either, but I think I would still follow our
Oh,
practice
practice,
to allow
yeah.
people the time. So,
At least 2 readings.
Yep, that's
yeah.
good.
And it's not holding anything up, so.
No, it's certainly not on fire, so,
It
yes.
is not. All right, the next item on our agenda is the new school project name selection. If it's okay with people, I'd like to hold that to see if Adam is able to make it here this evening, so that he can be part of that discussion as well.
Do you maybe want to take policy JICI out of order?
Yeah, why don't we take that out of order?
That'd be a
Yeah.
really good idea.
I think so.
All right, so policy JICI is item A under old business. It is the weapons and school policy. This is the second reading of this.
Okay, so the last time we looked at this, we had, I think, a very sound conversation about being able to bring any kind of a knife into our schools. The old policy did read that you could bring in a knife or a pocket knife that had a blade that was 2.5 inches or less. And I think when we started to talk about it, we thought, why would anyone need to do that? And so when we came back together as a policy working group, we eliminated the having a blade greater than 2.5 inches. And so now, any dangerous weapon, ammunition, explosives, including but not limited to a gun such as a pistol, revolver, rifle, shotgun, air gun, or spring gun, slingshot, bludgeon, brass knuckles, or artificial knuckles of any kind, or a knife or pocket knife, all of those things are now prohibited from being on school grounds. So any knife of any kind. And then we looked at the religious artifacts resembling weapons, and we talked about mostly the kirpan. And what we had in the policy before said that it must comply with the metrics above, but since we had removed the metrics above, that left us without metrics. And so we wanted to make sure that we had some kind of metrics, and so this is the policy, and it would be very rare for us to take a look at the procedure. But we have included the procedure in the packet tonight because we wanted to make sure that people could see the procedure. And so the procedure is part of your packet, and this is an agreement that would be made between the Hopkinton Public Schools and the families of children who are carrying a kirpan. And again, I want to underscore for the community that it is a student's religious right to carry a kirpan to school. We have to remember that education in Massachusetts is compulsory, and so if one of the ways a student practices his, her, or their religion is to carry a kirpan, they have the right to do that in our public schools. So we wanted to make sure that as we are making agreements with families, we had a list of criteria that we are comfortable with as a school committee and school district, and also things that we believe would be helpful really to families. And so I think people at home who would like to visit the policy can. The one thing that we have said about the kirpan is that it should be no longer than 3 inches in length. It should have a curved and dull blade. And of course, it would always be sheathed while in the public schools, and it would be worn under the clothing. So.
And Dr. Cavan, I think number 8 in the packet that went out still says 2.5 inches.
Yes.
And so that really has already been edited, but didn't make it in the packet, correct?
That's correct, yes. So the top does say 3, and number 8 says 2.5, but consistently it should all say 3.0.
Correct.
Yep, thank you.
Did the district receive any feedback regarding the policy in any?
Only from the Sikh community themselves, yes.
We wanted to ask if anyone wanted to make any.
Anybody would anybody like to share anything regarding the policy regarding it?
The way it read, it certainly seems to protect the religious rights of the children, which is the important concern of the Sikh community. So we are very appreciative of the stance that the school board is taking. I'll just say this from a personal point of view. So wearing a kirpan is fundamental to Sikh practice. Once a Sikh goes through what probably would be best described as a rite of initiation, there are articles of faith that they're required to carry on their person at all times, and the kirpan is one of them. The kirpan is particularly important and emotional because it really represents some of the fundamental beliefs of the Sikh faith, which is a very egalitarian religion started about 500 years ago, mostly as a revolution against inequality. So the kirpan is an embodiment of a commitment to social justice and an unequivocal commitment to fighting tyranny. So it's very much the part of the psyche of a practicing Sikh. And as somebody who was initiated rather late in life and had a few interesting experiences, carrying his own kirpan, I'll share one anecdote with you. I was earlier talking to some of you. My daughter graduated from Hopkins High School several years ago. She's done with grad school now. So she had created a play a year after she left Hopkins High School, which, again, had to do with themes of social justice. And I remember I visited British Parliament to present the play. And I remember going through security wearing my 9-inch kirpan in full view, with nobody in security batting an eyelid. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that there are many parts of the world where Sikh identity is very well understood and the importance of the kirpan is understood. I think steps like this one that the school board is taking, which we certainly appreciate tremendously, go a long way in extending that understanding of the community elsewhere as well. So I can only express my appreciation. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate that. Okay. Anybody have questions? I guess.
No, I'm just very appreciative of the changes, and I think a lot of thought went into it, and the fact that we've received no additional feedback, I think, is indicative that we've moved in the right direction, and so.
That is true. The school committee did not receive a single email regarding the policy.
And I think just, a note of thanks from the policy working group, Dr. Kavanaugh, myself, and I know that Susan didn't meet with you, with us that day, but very, very thankful for the education that you've given us on this topic and your community, and very, very thankful that we can bring this forward. Mm-hmm. And we couldn't have done it without the support and education that we got from you, so thank you for that.
Yes.
I appreciate that, and the pleasure is all ours. And we very much look forward to hosting you in our local Gurudwara in Westboro in coming days.
Yes, and I will also say thank you to Dr. Harpreet Singh, who came and did some instruction for our 28-member administrative team. We learned a lot about the Sikh religion and the history of Sikhism, so thank you for that.
Wonderful.
Thank him for that.
Okay. So this is a second reading. We typically do more than two, but there's nothing in the policy that I am uncomfortable with.
We typically do more than two.
Most policy, we don't sort of have to do more than two, but most policies you look at, we do 3, sometimes 4. There's at least one we did 5 of. I don't think we need to carry it out if there are no.
I can't see us doing any more changes to it.
Yeah, I mean, without
No.
anyone
I think we pretty
requesting
much cleaned
changes.
it up.
We could let it sit for another reading, just to be consistent. I feel very good about where it's gotten to, so.
I think it would be appropriate if we could, as these gentlemen are here and have sat and waited and for them to see it be passed.
I would feel strongly about having a third reading if we had received any feedback or we were making any additional changes, but we've had this in the packet, it's been out for the community. I don't have any concerns with voting tonight.
Okay. Is there somebody who would like to make a motion with regard to the policy?
There's no motion written.
I can't find it on the thing.
Somebody like a motion, to make a motion to approve newly labeled policy JICI as amended in the pact, as it's read.
So moved.
Motion by Lori, is there a second? Second by Susan, all those in favor?
Aye.
and it is unanimously approved. Thank you very much for coming, for being here in attendance with us, and for your thoughtful willingness to share with us the meaning behind all.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, now I'm going to go back a couple of pages to get this.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Okay, so let's move into item F, which is the FSD staffing increase request.
I'll take that. So as we've talked about several times during the school year, as the food service and the lunch demand continues to increase. Back in the fall, we came forward looking for an additional general worker at each of the buildings. At Hopkins, we have not been able to fill that general worker position. However, the demand for meals continue. So what we'd like to do is convert that position into a,
6.5 hour day.
Yes, assistant cook baker, I apologize. So that's for the Hopkins, and again, we've been rolling out the breakfast program for the elementary schools. Marathon is next. So in order to roll out their program, they are in need of an additional 6.5 assistant cook baker for that. And the thought with Marathon is they're actually going to create kind of a satellite, so outside of the cafeteria, so that the kids can come in, grab their breakfast, and go straight to class. So you're basically serving in two different areas, which is why you need to both prepare it and have another body.
Okay. That makes sense. Are there any questions on that?
No, I will say though, the Hopkins breakfast rollout was a huge hit in my house. And it also then required parents to get them there earlier to school than the bus was getting them there. So we had to have some discussions about that, but it's a very successful program.
Breakfast is that good, huh?
I don't know, maybe I just have food motivated children.
But this is a self-funding position.
It is self-funded through the cafeteria.
And it's important to know that it's not part of
Yes,
the budget.
that is correct.
Right, and then we're not adding positions that are adding to our existing budget.
It is
or
not
future
adding
budget.
to the operating budget, that's correct.
Thank you.
And the demand, the kids really are enjoying the breakfast. So,
I will move to approve an additional 6.5 hour per day assistant cook baker position at Marathon.
Okay. There's a motion by Amanda. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Lori. All those in favor?
Aye.
And it is unanimously approved. Thank you very much for all that you're doing to make things more efficient and better across the board with the food services.
thank you.
That brings us then into the Hopkinton Bullying Prevention and Intervention Plan, and that is you, Dr. Kaplan.
All right, thank you. So, in accordance with Mass General Law, we were tasked with our biannual revision of the Bullying Prevention and Intervention Plan. So every 2 years, what we do is we put together a subcommittee of this committee, and we meet several times, and we review the document really from page 1 to its close, and we look through what all of that language says, and we think really hard about whether or not it meets the needs of our students. So in your packet tonight, you have a redlined version that shows you all of the changes that have been made, and then you have a nice clean copy. So a couple of the highlights, and then if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. One of the things that has come up for us with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is that our document was very heavy before on using the bullying prevention and intervention reporting form. And so we would continue to ask people to fill out a form. Desi has told us that you cannot do that. And so if somebody wants to pick up the phone and call a building principal or send an email or have an in-person meeting, any of those like mediums for communication, we have to open that up. And so we've made those changes, I think, throughout the document to reflect that not everyone will have access to the form. And so we have to be wonderfully accommodating when a parent would like to have some other way to convey information to us. A second thing that has happened is we are making it very clear that we are now recording this data in PowerSchool. So even if you are a person who has been accused of bullying and there is not a finding of bullying, so that information still goes into PowerSchool and stays there. It's obviously, not held against a student, but we do keep that information because if in first grade there was an accusation, and then in third grade there was an accusation, and then in fifth grade, over time what you start to realize is that there have been little things that in isolation may not have been bullying, but over a series of years could then become bullying. So we do leave that in PowerSchool now. I think we have sort of bolstered a little bit the section on what bullying is not, because we want to make sure that people understand that sometimes under the umbrella of bullying we can be talking about discrimination or harassment or civil rights violations, and so all of that appears in there, I think, more clearly than it used to. We have added in training for our athletics coaches. That's brand new to this document. So anyone who is going to coach in the Hopkins Public Schools has to go through the bullying prevention and intervention training. Just on a very quick side note, the MIAA has been doing training for superintendents, high school building principals, and athletic directors. And so Mr. Bishop and Mr. Andrade and I did attend that training on a Friday and Saturday a few weeks ago. And I will say that the training on Saturday was pretty excellent because it really honed into athletics exclusively. So I appreciated that. And then I think the other final thing in this document worth talking about is curriculum revision. And so Deb Gorman, who is our subject matter leader for PE Wellness, has been working with the teachers to ensure that what's happening K-12 in terms of bullying education is vertically aligned and that it's developmentally appropriate, and that those topics continue to evolve and come into play when kids are ready to have particular aspects of bullying discussed. So those are the big pieces.
Susan, were you on this committee?
Yeah.
Was he?
Yes, and Susan was our school committee rep on the bullying subcommittee.
Anything you wanted to add to the process? I know I haven't done it for a few years, but I know that it is a pretty thorough process and lots of meetings that happen as a whole group typically, and as the smaller groups tackling each piece.
Could I just ask about the PowerSchool piece? That's
Sure.
new,
Yeah.
right? Retaining the history. Who can see that?
So typically only administrators can see that. Obviously the student information person can. It would, obviously parents, because it's part of the student record, if a parent wanted to know if that was in PowerSchool, and which is really why we're being very honest and open about it, that it exists there. But if you're a classroom teacher, you won't be able to go in and see that in second grade, for example, someone had been, accused of bullying, or, in fourth grade that someone had been found, that there were findings of bullying. So it's not visible to classroom teachers.
That was my concern. So teachers have a different access level?
Yes.
Okay.
I think the only time a teacher might have any awareness of a finding of bullying is if, say, for example, a student was applying for National Honor Society. Some of the sometimes we are clear with infractions with that group exclusively.
Interesting. And does a student have to authorize access to that at that point, or no? Like when you're trying to get to National Honor Society, is the student aware that history?
When a student applies,
yes,
that student would know that all of the criteria for things like leadership and service and all of the National Honor Society, that's made clear.
I'm just weighing. I think I understand the rationale. I'm weighing it against our sort of restorative justice philosophies, and someone who was in a pattern of a difficulty, who has learned and grown and changed their ways, and has that still in PowerSchool, makes me a little uneasy. So.
I should double check that for you, because I am not sure that it goes back as far as, say, for example, fourth grade.
Yeah.
I would have to, and if you want to not vote on this tonight and go back for this, but I can ask Mr. Bishop the grade level at which we start
Checking.
recording that Power School that somebody would have access to. You know, I know that, you know, something like plagiarism is a thing that that committee would be able to have access to. And I don't know if it begins in grade 8. Do you remember the answer to that? We did meet and talk about it, but now I can't remember the grade level. But now that you're saying that, I'm pretty sure it doesn't go back as far as something like 4th grade.
Okay.
But you have language in here, not related to that, but you have language in there about how long the information's retained, just generally speaking. Like it says.
7 years.
Under, page 21, the data storage and record retention. Discipline of students for infractions, so that would be the discipline record.
That might not cover, though, allegations that have been made that were not founded.
Right.
Yes, and allegations that, you know, were not founded, obviously, don't stay. Can you tell me what page you're on, Lori?
21.
Is that retention for after?
I think that that's after graduation.
After the student transfers, graduates, or withdraws, it's a 7-year
Yes.
retention, but
Yeah.
the look back, we're not sure what the look back is.
Right. The only thing that we ever keep after that 7 years is obviously a transcript, which by law we keep for 60.
Yeah.
So no transcripts when I'm 80.
Correct. At 78, you're all through.
I really appreciate all the work on this. I would like a little more information about the Power School.
Okay,
If
sure.
I don't know how other people feel. I mean, you can take a vote if
Yeah,
you want. I can
sure.
just abstain.
Part of the reason it's Captain Power School is because it gets uploaded to DESI.
Yeah.
And so the state actually is, you know, a heavy hand in making that decision for us.
Yeah.
We did talk about this for a very, very long time, and I know that the administrative team really struggles with it, because if you're putting in there that someone in 3rd grade was, you know, accused of bullying, it's tricky, but at the same time, the state wants to know how many, you know, allegations there were and how many findings there were, and because that's our student information system, when we press that magical button, all that information goes to DESI.
Yeah. I suppose if it's very locked down, as you say, to just administrate to certain individuals who are named, I guess I'd want to understand, and maybe it says it in here, and I didn't see the section, who can access that data? It would be nice to have that in here.
Okay.
Because I definitely would not want, you know, a teacher or someone who, just to have a preconceived notion of a kid.
Sure.
You know, based on something that's in Power School from a few years ago. I don't know,
Yeah,
Jack, if you have any
data.
thoughts on.
I was just wondering if, like, the student will know, right? Even if they're not, there's no findings on them. Like if they're accused of bullying in like 3rd grade, they'll have that information, because like I would just be like worried if someone like was going to apply for NHS or something, then suddenly that comes up and they have to like sort of combat it when they're applying instead of like knowing about it before.
Yes, allegations without findings wouldn't be considered.
Oh, okay.
But allegations with findings would.
Mhm.
But I'm very sure now that we're talking about this, that it wouldn't go back as far as 3rd grade. But the date of when we do start looking back at a discipline record, I would have to ask Mr. Bishop that question.
But a student could see his or her or their own record. Like if you go to Power School to do whatever you do at Power School, check your grades, do you go?
I don't think you can see your own.
Yeah, I don't think you see your discipline.
Okay, because that too could leave an interesting impression on yourself if you look back and think, oh my gosh, how was it? Was it like that in 3rd grade? I was in 3rd grade, you know. And it,
But I guess like I'm also looking at it from the opposite point of view, which is we traditionally have not had history that follows, and so when you are lacking in that information and you're not able to see the history, and you may take a future infraction as being a first time when it really wasn't.
right.
And I think when I look at it from Desi's point of view, they're also trying to evaluate which districts are having repeat offenders and why aren't they addressing it, and what are they doing about that. And so I think, you know, I get the reason why they're wanting to put it in there. I guess the other piece of it is, for me, is, you know, it's really well written how how to define bullying versus not. And so I think how well a school does in interpreting the allegations. It's very hard for me because I also look at it, it's like a whistleblower claim in a company, you know, and like if you're not tracking, then how are you actually like training and trying to, you know, protect people from it? And so I understand what you're saying. I wouldn't want it to hold people back. Because I actually wrote a paper about juvenile record expunction when I was in law school, so I have strong feelings on it. But at the same time, I do feel like if you're not tracking it, then you're also not responsible for ensuring that you don't that you're taking care of any patterns.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Maybe it'd feel better if we just document specifically who can access that information. Because I definitely see your point. It makes sense, and I know it's come up before, the patterns, and even things that were not founded as bullying, but there's a pattern of
Aggressive behavior.
yes, aggressive behavior. So yeah, just maybe a little more info.
Are we also, oh, sorry.
I just want to clarify, so on the National Honor Society piece, or?
Well, is it documented in here? It's a lengthy document. I don't remember.
No, no,
Who
yeah.
can see the power school? Who has
Oh,
access to it?
100% sure teachers cannot see, just a kid's regular old discipline record. That is true.
And where it talks about power school in here, does it talk about access to that?
No, but we can put that in there, like who has access.
That would make me feel better,
Yeah,
I think.
sure.
I think,
And then
I think
the
that's
NHS
a good ad,
would be-
because then you're also giving everybody notice. I think that's great.
The other question that kind of that brings up for me is what, if anything, we're doing to track who has been the victim of bullying? And are there, to be able to track, are there kids that are not being adequately protected for whatever the reason is that, you know, say Lori has been bullied in second grade with a found or unfound, and then it comes up again in third grade, or the same groups of kids making, you know, having bullying reports filed against them for doing something to a particular person. Are we tracking that in some way so that we know that kids that have had repeated episodes, that we're doing what is necessary to make sure that they are receiving support and protection as appropriate and safety plans when needed?
Yeah, and I think that's why, like, the electronic student information system is probably better than, well, it's definitely better than sort of those older methods where you had a paper folder,
Yep.
you know?
Yep. That's a good point. It just, based on what you were saying, I started to think of kind of the other side of it.
As we were in the final stage of this, we did have someone ask the question, should we say that the records that we keep now are entirely electronic? To sort of indicate that paper isn't there anymore. And we decided that that was almost self-explanatory, so we didn't
Yeah, we took the
incorporate
stance that, you know, in 2024, it's assumed, and public records law has, and student record law has all evolved, so we're gonna ride with that.
So students won't be receiving those folders at the end of their senior year. It's tradition.
We actually still maintain, there's still documentation, lives on parchment.
We have like our kindergarten screening in them.
Yeah.
It's
They
kind of
do.
fun. No,
Yeah,
I my.
yeah.
Eventually, you'll
My
just
son
get the thumb drives.
Well, there you go. There you go. All right, so I am in favor of bringing that back for another
Yeah.
clarification on something.
That would be great, and then when we do that, if the committee is comfortable voting on this, we also need to disband that subcommittee.
Yes. Okay, so that brings us into item H, which is naming of facilities, not the elementary school, but naming of facilities related to the theater auditorium stage at the high school.
Okay. I think you're on the right page for that. All right, so thank you for this. Mr. Bishop and some students at the high school felt very strongly that upon the retirement of our theater director, who's been with us for 22 years, Valerie von Rosenvinge, that they would like to dedicate the space in the high school auditorium, the stage, to her. So essentially, there would sort of be a plaque there, and we would rename that the Valerie von Rosenvinge Stage. What you see in your packet says that she's been with us for 17 years, but we had a last-minute correction this morning that it's really 22 years. And in addition to all of the musicals and plays that you see listed, and we'll get you an updated list of this because I think it would be nice just for public record to have it accurate. There are additional musicals. They are Music Man, Beauty and the Beast, Footloose, Pajama Game, Smile, My Fair Lady, and Godspell. And then for non-musicals, the additional ones not in your packet are Antigone, All I Really Need to Know, I Learned in Kindergarten, The Importance of Being Earnest, Spoon River Anthology, Inherit the Wind, A Midsummer Night's Dream, and Views from the Hill. So what will happen next is tomorrow we will put out the public announcement that we're thinking about naming the stage at Hopkins High School. We obviously have to let the community know. We have one very strong recommendation here, and so we will let the town weigh in. This is a 60-day process, in the same way that it has been for the renaming of the Elmwood School. And so the loveliness, I think, of this is that it will happen before the end of the school year and in keeping with Valerie's retirement. So we would like for you to approve the sort of launching of this naming so that we can send out an announcement in the morning.
Are there questions on this or comments?
I went to Game of Tiaras. I'll say that. I went to Game of Tiaras, and what I didn't know, there was a discussion with Valerie von Rosenvinge because she's retiring, and she had her charm necklace on, and at the end of each musical, the cast gives her a different charm. So, of course, she got a tiara this time, but it was very touching to see. It was just laden with charms. There were so many charms on that necklace. I couldn't believe it. But she certainly has left, whether this is something we do or not, she has left an indelible mark on so many students and the school, the district. Has been a home in the school for her classroom, her programs for a lot of students who needed a home. So she's done wonderful work. On this particular topic, I am curious, do we have any precedent for doing this? For naming part of the school for someone who's retired?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I can't think of, I do know that there are a lot of districts that will say this is, a particular field or, a particular court, like those kinds of things, but I can't think of anything, can you, in the high school that is named for a particular person?
Yeah, I thought the gymnasium was.
Oh,
Was that named for Robert Doyle?
Doyle, yeah.
Oh, the Doyle gym
Right.
at the middle school, yep, that's right. In the Brown gym at the market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would move to start the process of renaming the Hopkins High School auditorium stage in accordance with policy KF.
Okay, motion by Susan, is there a second?
Second.
Second by
I
Lori.
think that's a really lovely thing.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And it is unanimous. I agree, it is also, I think, a very lovely thing. I have been impressed with her work, not just.
And to have the students and staff feel so strongly
Yeah,
about you.
but I know that she has impacted the trajectory of many kids that have come through her classroom and her stage, so. All right, so the next item on our agenda is the school physician contract. We are going to pass over that for tonight because there was something that was not printed correctly in the packet, so we'll bring that back to discuss at our next meeting. The item after that is item J, which is the middle school outdoor track and field stipend.
Gotta get to the right page here. Got so many things in this packet.
It's a big packet this week.
Just 128 pages, I think.
Pages.
Okay, so here we go. This memo to you comes from Ricky Andrade, the athletic director. This year, In middle school outdoor track and field, we have 154 students, and last year we had 113 students. And so one of the worries is that the ratio from coach to student isn't that great, and then that gets us to the issue of, are we making sure that we're keeping kids safe? So what Mr. Andrade is asking for is that we can just hire an additional middle school track and field coach. And it would be certainly funded right through the athletic program because the kids are paying user fees, and so the user fee would, just cover the stipend to pay for that additional coach. The other thing that he is asking is that we keep this in place for next year if the numbers remain the same, and if they do not, we would be happy to reduce and go back to the number of coaches that we typically have.
Are there questions on this?
That's quite an increase. You said 113 to 154?
Yes, yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So our athletic programs don't break even with user fees. I mean, we have cost.
Right.
I mean,
That's true.
I think to say that the user fees offset, I mean, sure, but they go to a lot. Those user fees are stretched.
They sure are, yes.
So, I'm always in favor of athletics, as you probably know. I do wonder at what point we have to put a cap on some of our, you hate to have every sport be a quote-unquote cut sport, but there's a logistical limit at some point for a district, and I don't know, if we're here, but I think it's a conversation that we have to start thinking about because it's just difficult. I mean, whether it's facilities or head count, or it gets to a point where it's a little tough. I think for safety reasons, we need to have coverage. I think you talked about the anti-bullying training, which I'm really grateful for, going into the athletics. When you just get the coaches spread too thinly, it's hard to keep our values and our, what we're asking of athletics to be consistent. So I think this makes sense. I'm starting to have alarms in my head about the size of the athletic program, and just making sure that we're thoughtful about how we expand.
So I actually disagree with that from the middle school perspective. There's very limited opportunities in middle school sports, and for the kids that don't make the teams that have limits on the number of kids that they take, for baseball, softball, soccer, volleyball, those all have limits. Sometimes track and field is the only option a child has to actually take part in a middle school sport. And track and field is not something you have an opportunity to try at any of the younger grades. So I feel like limiting it at that age group would be really detrimental to the program. I think that's actually the time where kids start to branch out and try new things. I think it makes actually more sense at the high school to think about limiting because they have many other opportunities and things to do. But the middle school just has limited things, and even some of the clubs that were offered last year for middle school weren't offered this year. So I just think about it from the perspective of how many opportunities there actually are in middle school and whether or not that would be where I would think about drawing those lines.
It's a really good point. I think that when I think about some of the gaps in the middle school, I wonder, does everything have to be an interscholastic sport? Many middle schools don't have anywhere near the number of teams that we have. It's often hard at middle school to find competition. So I always wonder, should we be having like a kickball club, or are there other like intramural or sort of club athletics that wouldn't be at the same price point of maybe some of our coaching staff that's for interscholastic sports, but regardless, we've accepted the registration. We didn't have a limit this year. It's a no cut. I mean, we are where we are for this year. I guess I'm just bringing it up for food for future thought.
Just out of curiosity, a student who participates in sports, do they pay a flat fee?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes.
So each of these extra, whatever it is, 40 kids, each have paid a fee?
Potentially, there's a cap for families.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. And that, the cap, my
It's
recollection
the third
goes
child, right?
all the way through the high school and middle school combined.
Yeah.
If you have 3 athletes,
Three athletes.
realistically though, there are very few sports that take 7th graders. It's
Yeah.
just this, right? Is there anything else we do that, wrestling?
I was gonna wrestling.
So you wouldn't have a lot of 7th graders, but if 8th through 12th, if you had 3 athletes in that age group, you would only be paying the 2 athletic fees. And we do have waivers that we grant for fees for people who are, not able to financially, under a
I
financial aid
agree
policy.
with Lori that middle school's a time for kids to find their, not to be punny, but to find their legs.
I just think maybe that's a topic we put on a future meeting. I think
Yeah.
Amanda brings up a really
Yeah.
good point, and like looking at that,
Yep.
I think, it's a little outside of this particular item, but it does bring up the issue, and I'm not disputing what she's saying from like a fiscal responsibility perspective, but I think that's like a different topic that we probably should bring to another meeting.
I agree.
To see how the amounts generated as opposed to what it costs to run that sport, et cetera, et cetera.
I think it's a good conversation for a few months down the road. In terms of whether we decide at that time we'll do anything, and if we do want to do something, what the criteria would be for that. Is there somebody who would like to make a motion relative to the FY25 stipend?
I move to approve the additional stipend for middle school track coach, the opportunity to maintain the stipend for fiscal year '25 if the student athlete numbers are comparable next year.
It's a motion by Susan, and I just want to highlight that it's the opportunity, it doesn't commit us to doing it for next year. Is there a second on that?
I'll second it.
Second by Amanda. All those in favor?
Aye.
And so that is unanimous with many thanks to our athletic department. So that brings us into the VEX IQ Worlds, HMS Team W and Team 2. Dr. Kavanaugh.
All right, so we have 2 middle school teams, Team W and Team 2, and they are looking for your approval to travel to the VEX IQ Worlds competition. That will be in Dallas, Texas. They will be leaving on April 31st and returning on May 3rd.
April 31st.
Yeah, the
30.
Oh, yeah. You're right. Oh, it does actually on the application say April 31st. Yeah, so it must be April 30th. Sorry about
For
that.
someone that's born in early May, that really makes a difference.
Yes. All right. Any questions or comments on this?
I think it's fabulous.
Anybody who would like to make a motion?
Well, I'd move to approve final travel for Team W and Team 2 robotics to Dallas, Texas, April 30th to May 3rd, 2024.
Motion by Susan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Lori. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And it is unanimous, and congratulations to our robotics teams. Okay, so that moves us down. We had already covered old business item A, which is the policy JICI. I'm going to recommend that we pass over policy BDFB for tonight and bring that back in our next meeting, and then allow us to then go into reports.
Are we gonna do the naming? I wouldn't wanna wait
So
too much.
late.
Are you gonna put it off till next meeting?
Unless Adam shows up.
Okay.
It does feel like it's late to be taking on,
Yeah.
I feel like it deserves a lot of,
Didn't we have a timing issue?
the timing is on, it couldn't be earlier though. It doesn't prevent us from going.
But I felt like it had a timing issue with what the school building committee needed for signage and.
So it was not the signage, it was the interior themes. And correct me if I'm wrong, the discussion was that if we do have a little bit of leeway.
So, yes, the designers are now really determining what the interior of that school is going to be. And maybe as a good point of reference for the community, if you go into Marathon Elementary School, and the name of it is Marathon Elementary School, there's, it all starts here, and then you start to see like cruise shells that are, designed into the flooring. And so you really get the sense that the interior of the school is designed around the name of that school. When we were visiting schools, so way back when, before we even had, real notions of what our Elmwood replacement school would look like, we had gone places where if they were naming the school after a particular person, there'd be kind of a silhouette of that person and talk about all of the things that person had done. So if there were gardening, if the person had done some kind of thing with gardening or politics or held office in town, or was a particular kind of educator, there would be educational pieces like as part of the mural in that building. And so what Perkins Eastman wanted to do was to start to get together with teachers to think about what the interior colors and themes would look like. Right now, the work that they're doing really focuses on the sort of natural landscape here in Hopkinton, on things like, meadows and forests and rivers and that kind of thing. So they would like some guidance in terms of the name, but I don't think that it's something that if it didn't happen tonight, it would sort of upset the designer apple cart, so to speak. I think that it would be all right if it lasted, if it went out 2 weeks and they had to think about it then.
So I just want to, just for a point of clarification.
Yes.
So we're passing on policy BDFB at the request of the CPAC organization so that they could all be present. That was the old business that we just passed on doing tonight.
So that was not for CPAC to be present in its fullness. That was the recommendation of our CPAC liaison.
Okay, but so I guess I'm missing, what are we talking about passing right now?
So in terms, so coming back to the CPAC policy, which is not the procedure, it's the document that we did, the policy is not a super long piece, it's separate from the procedure, as well as the school physician contract. And then the naming of the facilities, I'm happy to have that conversation if people want to do that. My concern with that is just that it's now almost 9:30, and I don't know how much mental acuity people feel that they have to do a lengthy discussion on that. We could start the discussion and not make a decision is the other piece.
So based on how we structured the agenda and the timing that we had on the agenda, we had planned to be here until 10 o'clock, and we still have 40 minutes. And so my opinion is that we should at least start the discussion, because we very well could get ourselves to a place where we've narrowed it down to make for a final decision easier. I also feel like there likely is quite a few people who are watching for that discussion, and then we'd be passing that over. I don't disagree with you in terms of the long days everybody's had, but I do feel like we should try.
I guess I'm happy to have the conversation and to express preferences. I do feel like it's a better vote if we have 5 school committee members here. Would be the...
Did we get any indication that Adam was coming?
So what he had said to me was that he was waiting for a replacement at work, and that he wouldn't be able to be at the beginning of the meeting for the executive session, but that he was hoping to make it to the meeting itself.
His replacement, right?
His replacement to show up at work.
Yeah.
And so that's why I had initially moved it from the beginning, hoping that he would be here in there. Other thoughts? Do you want to go ahead and?
I'm just kind of wondering how this is all gonna, given the number of names and that there are 4 of us, and what our preferences may be on that.
Well, that's
I think we should have a discussion.
Yeah.
Let's
I
have a
mean,
discussion.
it's gonna be a lengthy discussion, but it probably wouldn't hurt to begin and see if we kind of come around, circle around a couple of potentials.
All right, so let's go in. Do we have a link to the full? Do you have that on the full list?
I know we have.
Yes,
There was
I
a,
think I had
that
sent
sent it out by
to
email,
everybody.
right?
Yes.
I also think what was really helpful was Dr. Kavanaugh's breakdown of where the numbers fell for the
Yeah.
different types.
Yes, I had made you all collaborators on that survey so that if you click on the responses button, you can actually go in and take a look.
All right, there's not a link. It's in the agenda itself.
All right, do you want me to?
Yeah, would you?
Put it, I can put it on the screen, I just have to.
I just was looking at your report from last week where you had like put the top few for each section. We certainly got more comments on this than any other policy.
We did. The comments that, just to summarize, like the ones that came to all of us really, I think were all centered around not wanting to rename the district-wide to make have the early learning, the elementary, et cetera.
How do you want to go about this? Do you want to take it a group at a time and talk about
So,
thoughts?
yes, so I'm having a little trouble pulling this up.
So the
Can you send the link?
geographic, marathon related,
Yeah.
just people and big concepts. Is that right?
Yeah.
There's 4.
You want me
Yep.
to send, reshare this?
Yeah, do you mind that?
Nope.
I almost wish we had a whiteboard.
Totals and scratch off and.
Okay, so now you all have that in your inbox. And you know that it doesn't start till you get to about slide 9. But that is the complete collection of suggested names.
All right, so I think what would be helpful here would be to go through. I don't think we need the whole thing on that, but to talk about specific categories.
So page 64 starts with the geographic, 65 is marathon related, 66 just talked about what you use for people, and then the names of the people are after it. 68 was big concepts. I think that was the highlight ones.
I mean, I could throw out a thought.
Please.
Just one person on the committee of 5, but I think we have, for me, I was definitely looking for things that are connected to Hopkins. So sometimes, like, some of the learning concepts were okay, but they didn't feel Hopkins specific. So in those cases, I wasn't as drawn to a generic learning concept versus something that really spoke to our town. So I'm personally more in favor of not an individual's name. So for me, that category was not appealing. I'd rather go with something that's more related to the geography of the natural environment, for me personally. And marathon, I do love that we're the start of the marathon, but I also feel like Hopkinton is so much more than that. And we already have the marathon school. So if anyone else was feeling the same way, I'll just throw that out there. If you weren't, that's fine. But for me personally, I was focused on really the geographic and natural environment type names more than the others for those reasons. If that helps or hurts. That was just where I was.
Yep, that's.
I kind of was drawn to the geographic ones too. Partially, I think naming for a person can kind of begin to create some, well, why not this person or that person, or whereas if, you know, you're gonna name it Charles River, or you're gonna name it Whitehall, or those are all things that are ecologically sound places here in the community.
I have a similar feeling on it. I mean, this is my second school naming activity, and I
You're
felt
experienced.
I know.
Show us
But
the
that doesn't make it
backstory.
any easier. I don't feel drawn to choosing one person because I do feel like every single person that was listed had fantastic reasons they should be named after a school. So I don't feel qualified to dissect between one person versus another. The similar to what you said, Amanda, I feel like we already have a school named Marathon and it has its own uniqueness, and so what other things are important to the town? I also was thinking about, somebody had said to me, well, what's wrong with keeping Elmwood, because it was a great name, and but when I think about why Elmwood was named, it was because it was in the corner of Elm and Wood.
Right.
So when I have thought about this school, I've thought about where it's located and what it's near. And so the geographic names have more of an appeal for me, although there are some of them that I feel like are less relevant to where the school is situated. So I could narrow it down easier, but my draw is toward geography as well.
So in terms of, I actually agree with what's been said. The names, there were some really excellent names submitted, but I know that that's a tough choice, looking at it, kind of evaluating one over another.
Why is one person better than the other?
Right, and the contributions that have been made in Hopkins to the communities, to the schools, et cetera, are valid for many different reasons, and it would be hard to choose between some really excellent candidates. I was also drawn to the geographic because the Marathon, I similarly felt that that's something that has been done. I also, my concern, start line, I was concerned about the brewery. Although I actually like that name. If there was not a brewery by the same name on the same road, I might have been drawn to that. The learning and concepts ones, some really good recommendations that had been made for that. But at the end, I was drawn more towards the geographic names.
Well, that's
That
consensus.
actually is
That
consensus.
helps.
That actually is way easier than what I
Yeah.
had projected out. So in terms of looking at, oh, you've already pulled that up, thank you. What was done in the survey, you can see obviously the survey results here. The head of the Charles River, Charles View, Headwaters, and Whitehall. Hayden Row is not a bad name, but I do agree that the schools all being technically on Hayden Row could potentially cause some confusion. It's also not as, I guess, specific in some ways that it.
I really kind of thought, head of the Charles was a little cumbersome,
Yeah.
but I thought Charles River was a really good one.
So it's funny for me because Charles River, there is a school named Charles River, and so that, not in town. So that was my concern with that one, even though it was voted as high, and then Whitehall's even higher. Whitehall to me is on the other side of town, so if we had built a school in Fruit Street, then I would have been a great name.
Yes.
My lean was toward Charles View because I thought it was easier to say, and that neighborhood is right there. So that was where my lean was when we were going through this whole process. I don't know what Headwaters means. And
It's the
maybe,
start of it.
is it?
It is.
Yeah.
I
That's
thought it
what
was like rapids or something.
Headwaters, yeah, where the headwaters is. Yeah.
But that's just my
Yeah.
lack of education.
I was 100% where you know, what you both have already said. Like, I think I like the idea that we are at the start of the Charles River. I think that is notable. It's distinct for Hopkinton. I was trying to build the concept of headwaters or Charles River. Could it be like Charles Meadow or Charles Spring, or is there something that we could, Charles Glen? Is there something that we could do? I was thinking from here to Cambridge and Boston. Perhaps there are other Charles River schools. I didn't know there was one, but it doesn't necessarily matter.
No, it's
But-
just a point I bring up. I don't say that it has to be like indicative of yes or no on it.
No,
But I
like-
just think about when you're Googling something.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
I already
pop-
Google Hopkinton Public Schools and you get New Hampshire.
Right.
And Rhode Island.
Head of the Charles is definitely so synonymous with the regatta that it would be, it's kind of tough for me. It's just,
Yeah, and it's in Boston. Yeah.
in Cambridge. So I think, but I'm curious about exploring the Charles River dimension. That was something that I was curious about. For the same reasons that I love Whitehall, but for the same reasons as you said,
Yeah, it's on the other.
it's not here. So I think we're onto something with the Charles River. I'm not quite sure we've got it unless we do maybe Charles River. I like Charles View, but it's also the neighborhood. I didn't know if we wanted to be distinct from the neighborhood just to make sure it's inclusive. I also wondered to myself, why not Elmwood? For me, I think we are starting something new. It's a 3-grade school, and even though I like the name and we could carry it for historical reasons, I feel like we're building together a new community of 3 grades, and it seemed kind of fun and important to start that with a new identity. So although I like Elmwood, I landed with the Charles River set.
So I would say between the Charles River and the Charles View, and I think the split for me is kind of between the fact that I also am aware of the Charles River School and the Charles View neighborhood being close by. I like Whitehall, but for the same reason, it is on the other side of town.
Maybe our charter is to go away and think about the Charles River type names a little bit more.
Yeah, and that could allow for Adam to
allow his input.
Yeah, have some input and think around that too, and maybe one of us will wake up in the middle of the night with a sticky note and have some grand idea,
But to have narrowed it down, that's the direction that we're going, is in the geographic recommendations related to the Charles River.
Yeah. Look at that, Nancy, 12 minutes.
We still have reports.
No, I mean, it took 12 minutes
yes,
to get
okay.
down that. That's an accomplishment getting that.
That is an accomplishment, given how many names we have. And I do like being able to percolate ideas in our heads and bring it back so that Adam can also participate in the process.
It would be nice if there was a way to say, instead of saying head of the Charles, but there was a word that, other than, root wouldn't be the appropriate.
Font, spring. I did the
Charles
training
Mouth.
today. I was Googling synonyms for
Headwaters,
Yeah.
and you came up with.
Try it. Well, font, spring, there's different, yeah. There aren't a lot of great ones.
No. And headwaters is just far too cumbersome.
And I don't know, we could maybe just like Charles Wood or something. I don't know if we want to, if we just want to be clear and say Charles River. I don't know, just
Water.
think about it.
Charles Rose School.
Did you say Charles Grove?
Do you have any thoughts,
Charles,
Jack?
Charles Grove.
I like the
Yes.
better.
I've always liked the Charles View one, just because I feel like it's like I could see that being as a name from the beginning, because it's just easier to pronounce. I feel like it's less of a mouthful than head of the Charles saying that. So
That's what I agree with, but I also think too, if you can see the Charles from the school, that also works.
Yeah.
And what is the other Charles View?
It's a neighborhood.
It's right across the street.
Yep.
The opening.
Well,
to
they
it.
could Do they have any large signs that say they're called Charlesville?
It's not large, it's like.
There is a, it is.
There is a
known.
sign, it is known.
That that's a neighborhood.
That's what I kept
But
thinking.
that would actually indicate where it is.
That is true.
Yes.
But I think this is good, a good narrowing down.
Yeah, it is. You know, and part of my process in my own quirky little way was, you know, kind of in my head walking around trying to imagine, okay, I'm headed over to, in trying out different names that way.
So when I thought of the head of the Charles, what I thought people were gonna do with that was make it Hawk, H-O-C. Because no one's gonna say head of the Charles Elementary all the time.
Hawk Elementary.
No, I don't necessarily advocate for that. That's what I thought
No.
would happen. So I always thought with this when I was naming my kids, like, what nicknames could come out of this?
You
So-
check their initials?
Yes.
Yeah, some people can end up with really horrible initials.
But, so I think this is good.
Okay.
And thanks to everybody for the amazing suggestions.
I also was part of the marathon naming process. I don't remember there being as many like
Categories. It was very much between, I think the marathon theme was big because of center school being at the start of the marathon. And then names, again, were a big theme. And I think we all kind of felt, you know, it's funny, I don't remember Hoyt being a name, but he hadn't passed, so I don't know if that was, but we had the same issue about whether or not we wanted to pick one person over others.
It's a hard, and you know, I so appreciate the thought that went into the names that were submitted, but that actually makes it harder because there were so many thoughtful thoughts.
I know, but you learned a lot about great people.
I know. Okay. Including some that are still active in the community, so. All right, so we have a charge to come back with that, and I imagine having narrowed it down some, we may receive some additional feedback from the community, which is always welcome and helpful, so.
Maybe somebody will come up with that synonym for Head of Charles.
Could be, all right. So that then will bring us into reports, Jack.
Hello everyone, thank you for giving me the opportunity to report tonight. I'd like to begin with some important new announcements from the high school. For seniors and their parents, the much anticipated senior parent celebration has been scheduled on May 21st at 6:30 to 10:30 p.m. at Gillette Stadium. Tickets are $55 a person and go on sale Monday, March 11th. On top of this, the class of 2024 car parade has also been decided. It will take place on Saturday, June 1st at 11 a.m. The senior capstone projects are off to a great start. Students submitted their proposals earlier this week, and the first round of revisions is just now beginning. Students will either be asked to revise their project if it does not meet the requirements, or their project is accepted, meaning they can go forward with their proposed plan. The one requirement is that students are passing all classes as of April 12th, and the projects will commence just after break on April 22nd. For the junior class, prom is just around the corner. The date has been decided as May 10th, 2024, from 6 to 10 p.m. at Lakeview Pavilion, 45 Lakeview Road, Foxborough. Ticket price is $65, and tickets are available via My School Bucks starting on March 18th. This past weekend, the Hopkins Jazz Ensemble performed at the MAJE State Finals after receiving a gold medal at their last competition. They wound up falling short by just 1 point as they finished second place in their first year participating in Division I. Also, congratulations to the future health professional students who participated in the HOSA State Leadership Conference on March 2nd. Students competed in healthcare events, attended workshops, met medical professionals, and tried hands-on healthcare experiences. Of the 73 HHS students who competed at the event, 33 qualified for the International Leadership Conference to be held in Houston in June. Hiller athletics are also transitioning into the spring season. This includes sports of baseball, softball, boys and girls lacrosse, track and field, as well as the new addition of boys volleyball. The teams are concluding their trials this week, and teams will be decided with that. Thank you.
I can just say I got to go to the MAJE state finals Saturday. The jazz band was great. I didn't realize this is the first time in Division I.
Yeah, I believe so.
There was some steep competition,
Yeah.
but they sounded fabulous. They always do us proud. So.
That's great. Lots going on.
Yeah.
Great, that is gotta feel a little surreal getting into all the senior weeks.
Yeah, I know. I've always
the
seen my siblings
promposals?
doing all of it, but now it's me, so it's a bit great.
Have the promposals started yet?
I haven't seen any yet. I'm sure they're going on behind the scenes though.
Oh, I bet they're started months ago.
Yeah.
I know that in years past, there have been documents that have been shared among seniors about what outfits they're wearing so that there's not a lot of repeats.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's like Instagram pages for that.
Oh my God.
All right, thank you.
I'd like to know the history of that term, promposal.
It's not my generation.
Not mine either. No.
Some of them are creative.
My prom, we sat on the floor and listened to music, so, you know, that was the 60s kind of 70s vibe.
That's the post-prom party at the school.
Are they doing it at the school this year?
I don't know where the post prom. We had it at
Apex, right?
yeah, or it was a place like I don't know if it was
Urban
Apex.
Air?
It was Urban Air in Bellingham, I believe, last year. Yeah.
It was at Apex, I think, the year before, and those were the first two, I think, that were not at the high school the way it used to be, where parents would work really hard while the seniors were off or juniors were off at prom to transform the high school into a big theme. A lot of work. All right, so superintendent's report.
Sure, thank you. So this is the superintendent's report for March 21st, 2024. And the goal of this report is to just maybe answer important questions about the Hopkins School Addition project. Some of the answers in here come from our workshop last week, and so it's really just an opportunity to reiterate them. One thing that we want to point out is the first district-wide study was actually conducted in 2019. I think people sort of forget the history of that. And that was done by Drummy, Rosane, and Anderson. And I think it's important because, you know, people are asking, well, where do all of these numbers come from? And, you know, different architects can be off, like, you know, just by a few numbers here and there. But we've known that we have needed to find space in our buildings for at least 5 years. So this has been a long time in the making. This diagram was actually originally put together by DRA, and now you can see that it's been sort of upgraded by our friends at Perkins Eastman. When we looked at this last in 2023, really, you can see where these numbers were. So 640 students in grades 4 and 5. You know that today we're at 689. And I do remember people saying, do you really think you're going to get to those targeted marks before the end of the school year? And I always say, I don't know that I'll get there, but we're going to get close. And I think you'll see that we did. So when we take a look at Elmwood's potential configuration, 774 was the number if we built a 2-3 school, and 1176 was if we built the 2-3-4 school, which is what we have done. And I think an important number comes over here, where if we take a look at the 4,173 students, the prediction was that we would increase by about 20%, 22.2%, or 916 students by the year 2032. So this diagram was an interesting one to me as well, and this again is a DRA diagram but upgraded or updated by the Perkins Eastman folks. And if you went back to 2019, you would see that the gymnasium was green at that time because it was an enormous space in terms of square footage. So why did it go to red? And I think that this is what we were talking about earlier tonight. So what we do with the gym now is we divide it into 2 sections. So essentially it's 2 classrooms because kids get physical education twice a week. They only get art once, they get music once, they get library once, but PE they go to twice a week. So if 30 classrooms are meeting here and 30 classrooms are meeting here, all of a sudden, we talked about this, if you get to the 31st, you need another gym station. And so that's one of the things that you're going to see in some of the drawings that I will show you tonight. The cafeteria was red in 2019, and it is red today. So
Redder.
it's redder today. Yes. I think another interesting thing about the Hopkins School is These classrooms are right-sized within 10%. And so if you look at our classrooms, if you were doing an MSBA project, the MSBA would not want to fund classrooms at that size because sort of technically they're a little bit small. The MSBA, if they were asking us to build this building and they were partnering with us, they would require that the classrooms be larger.
Yeah, that was really interesting from the workshop. I didn't know that before the workshop, which is another good reason that we're doing this the way we're doing it.
Yes. So back to one of our favorite questions, enrollment projections. I show this slide all the time, so I won't spend a lot of time here. The prediction was that in 23-24 we'd have 670 students. Today we actually have 689. If we look at what Dr. Wagman predicted for 30-31, he was at 780, and so you can see that we are less than 100 students away from that target in the year 23-24. So that's something to think about. And then the MSBA prediction was 803. We're about 114 kids away from that. And the 803 was, again, we're in the 2030s. We love this particular slide because what this is showing us is that because we have a 2-3-4 school and it was being built for about 1,200 kids, it keeps those grades in the green. Interestingly, if you pull grade 6 out of the middle school, you also keep the middle school in the green. And when we get to the year 2029, you can see that the high school falls into the red. So why is that important? If you look at this slide, I think it helps us to understand how that flexible space that we want to use in the middle school, why that's so important. When we built the Hopkins School in 1999, there were 24 original classrooms. We've added 4 modulars, and then we have taken over 2 interior, the windowless classrooms that we, really have used over time as small group or labs or even home economics at one point in time. So we now have 30 classrooms, and if our sort of target class size is about 22 and a half students, we would then say at max, we should probably have 675 kids based on the 30 classrooms, even though we believe that those interior classrooms aren't ideal. So we're at 689, we're out of space now at Hopkins. If we look at the middle school, now this is interesting, we have 39 regular classrooms and 9 science classrooms, which give us 48 classrooms times the 22.5 students. Theoretically, we could accommodate up to about 1,084. This is kind of neat. If we take a look back at this and we go to the year, I think 2026, and we add up 6, 7, and 8, the amazing thing is that you're going to get 1,084 students. It's just uncanny how those numbers worked out. There's no rhyme, there's no mathematical sense to it, but that's how it happened. So if we put an addition on the Hopkins School and we add 28,000 square feet to that building, when you pull out the 6th grade, you're really freeing up 23,000 square feet. And I don't know that we've looked at it in that sense before. So when we go back to thinking about the year 2029, when the high school goes to red, clearly we're going to have more middle school students, but it's really nice to be able to say that while the middle school is staying green, there is space to be pulling in, some department or at least a portion of a department. So say, for example, everyone who teaches freshman and sophomore math may move into that wing that is closest over to the high school. No decisions have been made about who would inhabit it, but the space would exist. So we talk about the upstream gains. This is a really nice illustration, I think, of those upstream gains. What will happen to class sizes? This was one of the really nice slides I think that Perkins Eastman had put together for us. Currently what we have in our classrooms, really it's about 24, 25 students in a classroom, at least at grade 4. And if we don't put on an addition and we had 2 grade levels in that building, you'd have 29 students in a classroom. And I know Hopkinton is not a community that would hope for 29 students. No community would. But if you have the addition and you have the 803 proposed students, that classroom goes down to 22 students. And I think it's really nice just to look at this visual as compared to that visual and think about the ability a teacher has to interact with this many kids, to be able to set up small small group kinds of instructional models for that many kids, you can just visually see how doable it is.
I think the other piece too that was brought up last week that was interesting about was that our classroom sizes in that building are actually small for
Yes.
what to date. So even if you're talking about moving to a model of 29 students in a classroom that's already small for benchmarking across other schools, like that space constraint is huge. So I just remember that being an interesting point they brought up, that our classroom size physically is just not big either.
And that building was built for 4-5. And when they opened, 5-6 moved in. It was really an effort to pull kids out of the middle school, high school complex at the time. And we just have to remember that 6th grader bodies are bigger than 4th grader bodies.
The thing that struck me about this slide at the workshop, which I thought also was a good slide that they put together, was I feel like when Hopkins was built and the capacity for the classrooms was higher than 22.5, I forget what it actually was.
25.
25. In my mind, I'm thinking in the 90s, we were probably sitting in rows facing forward. And it's a very different capacity game when you've got kids in an older model sitting in rows facing forward. You can fit a whole bunch more people than when you do this. But today's learning standard is group work, it's this kind of, you get up, you walk around, you have different places. So just the standard of instructional delivery and the way students learn is not what it was. And that's why these smaller classrooms probably could accommodate 25 in rows.
Yes.
But we don't do that. That would be not doing the right kind of education. So, I think it's important that we can educate in the way that we need to educate kids in small groups with the ability to move around.
Yeah, there's a lot of research that's been done, and it started sort of endemic to the math classroom, but now I think that it's, kind of seeping into other disciplines of sort of defronting the room, and using what they would call vertical public surfaces, which is really just a fancy name for whiteboards all around the room, so we can watch kids thinking in real time. Why are we not partnering with the MSBA? And I think we've talked about this before, but I think the workshop really opened our eyes to some other kinds of thinking about this. So one of the reasons is that MSBA funding is really highly unlikely, and I think Dan Colley from Perkins Eastman did a very nice job of showing that, and I have it on the next slide. But the MSBA also controls the timeline. So people who will remember, we submitted an SOI for the Elmwood School in the spring of '21, about a week before the onset of the pandemic. And in the best case scenario, we'll be opening the doors to the new Elmwood School in September of 2027, best case scenario. It's a 7-year process, start to finish. So if we're looking at when things turn red on that stoplight data enrollment chart, you can see that we don't really have that kind of time. The MSBA does control the size of your building, so when you're partnering with them, they can tell you how big they want particular spaces to be, and then they also do things like put funding caps on things. So you have to pay for an owner's project manager, and you have to pay the going rate for that, but they might say, we're sorry, we're only going to give you $2 million for that, except for the cost is $3 million for that. So while it seems very attractive, and sometimes you'll go on the MSBA website and it will say the reimbursement rate is 42%, and then people will wonder why it's really only 25%. It's for reasons such as that.
Well, and I thought the other interesting piece about that too was that your cost could be higher going through the MSBA because they could force you to make a bigger building than you had originally planned.
Absolutely, yes. As we take a look at this, he's done a nice job of kind of showing us what that would look like if you started this process and maybe submitted your SOI in 2025. Here you are in 2031 before the close of 2031 before you're opening your doors. And as you just said, Lori, the larger size and more extensive reno that the MSBA would require, plus escalation on the project, it's typically about 4% a year, at least that's what they said happens in their experience. You really might be paying more for a building if you partnered with the MSBA than if you did not.
Sorry, I stole your thunder.
Nope, that's okay. And just a single slide on that, according to Perkins Eastman, construction costs have escalated about 4% a year. So what might some other options be? So I wanted to talk about choices because the community will be deciding what happens with the Hopkins project. So we could say that grade 5 would remain at Hopkins alone, but that's going to leave a lot of unused space. And when you are a school district that is sort of desperate for physical plant space, it doesn't make a lot of sense to leave grade 5 in isolation there. So one of the outcomes obviously is that this would result in wasted space, and it would cost the district money upstream, because we just saw how if you add 28,000 square feet, you free up 23,000 square feet. We could put grade 5, leave grade 5 in Hopkins School, and then put some of grade 6 in there, kind of on a rotating basis. So because grade 6 offers our students particular related arts, and you need the physical spaces that are appropriate to teach those related arts, those spaces exist now in Hopkinton Middle School. They don't exist in Hopkins School. And so if you put kids into Hopkins maybe a third at a time, you could rotate them through. But again, that means kids would be switching teachers, and our teachers rely on knowing the kids so they know how to differentiate, know what an individual kid needs. We do a lot of, sort of small group remedial things inside general education classrooms, so that, sort of upsets that teaching model. And again, this is one of those things that kind of neglects the upstream freeing of space. And so the third option is to have both grades 5 and 6 at Hopkins, and that would mean the community completes the addition project and grades 5 and 6 occupy that. The outcome of that, we have to be very careful to call out the price tag. And so the closest thing that we have right now maybe to a price tag is that when we heard our town manager speak on January 28th when he did his comprehensive budget report, he indicated that if we took all of the FY25 capital budgets, and obviously the Hopkins School is the biggest driver of all of those FY25 capital items, the tax impact would be $505 on a single family home at the median price of $852,000, and that would happen in 2028. What will the new school offer? And I know that we saw these, but from Perkins Eastman tonight, and from Vertex, so I won't take a lot of time with that. But you can see that there's increased parking spaces from 87 spaces to 134. It's not wasted on anyone, I don't think, that we are desperate for parking around our public schools. I do love the walking path. One of the things that we've learned about kids at that age is that when they go outside, they love to do a lot of chitty chat, but they also like the physical exercise of just doing some walking. And then there's play fields and there's courts, but this is appropriate really for grade 5, 6 students. And you can see that we've got good service parking, receiving, the bus drop, and it takes you right through to the loop road. Here you can see our enlarged cafeteria, and this here might be the most amazing part of this, and I know that the rest of the world won't think it is, but if you've ever been in the kitchen at the Hopkins School, it is literally as big as a postage stamp, and how our workers put up that many lunches every day in such a small space. So it's beautiful that there'll be a couple of lines, and the servery will be very long, and so our kids should be able to get through those lines much more quickly than they do today. And over here you can see the band and chorus spaces. This will take up a lot of the old cafeteria stage. We will be replacing the cafeteria stage, so that will still exist.
So
Here
I think the current survey, just a comment from the tour, was one of the most eye-opening things in the tour. Just the size to serve like 700 students was unbelievable.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that we can
Kind of think
overstate how
there's
small
probably
it is.
some kitchens in Hopkinton, in homes that are
Yeah, that's what I
as
was
large as
thinking.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you really could try and like compare it to like Hopio. It's like, something
Yeah.
that here people are in, and like it's just not a lot of space. Yeah.
Here you can see the enlarged band, chorus, and orchestra spaces, and this is really much needed. Right now, our kids are using the cafeteria, they're using the gymnasium, because there just isn't a large enough space to accommodate our ensembles. Here you get a little feel, I think, for what the classrooms are going to look like. This is the end of the building where you would have the modular classrooms eventually attached. There's a special education intensive classroom here and a special education intensive classroom here. We need both of those spaces based on numbers of special education intensive students. It's really nice that those spaces are across from, these sensory areas here. So if our kids need OT, PT, or sensory space, those things are built right next to the intensive special education spaces. Here you have the gymnasium and the multipurpose space, and so you'll see that on the next slide as well. One thing we should point out about this corridor space here is you can see these flexible learning spaces. Hopkins makes beautiful use of that now, and so those things will still be intact, which we like very, very much. And a science classroom fits in here with these two classrooms, and eventually when these are added, you'll have a whole team that can exist in this area with 5 classrooms. So all of this planning, even though we're making an addition, has been very, very deliberate. And then finally, you get to see the gymnasium with these 2 teaching spaces, and then this is the multi-purpose room over here. What's nice about these sort of public restrooms is if people want to be able to use this gymnasium, and it is a full-size gymnasium, the public can come in. We can cordon this off for safety reasons from the rest of the building, and there are rest facilities, so it's sort of one-stop shopping. And that's all I have for you, but I thought there were so many things that that like sort of bear repeating, that it was really nice to bring them back up tonight.
Thank you. Any questions for Dr. Kavanaugh? Okay. All right, then that brings us into the school committee chair report. Payroll warrant S24018 has been approved. Warrants 24-051S, 24-052S, 24-053S, 24-054S, and 24-055S have been approved, all included in your folder. And that's, it did already report out that we did receive some email regarding the naming of the school facility. People have liaison reports. Right, then that moves us into any future agenda items that people would like to throw on our list of things.
Just what we were talking about earlier with,
Track and field.
well, just
size
like
middle
the
sport
sizing of
teams.
sports in general, I think is what we were getting at, and where, what that expense may bring, and whether or not we want to think about
No
numbers.
comprehensive
Yeah.
look at it.
I wasn't just thinking about for middle school, though, I think.
No, but it's been more
Yeah.
comprehensive looking at
Right,
district-wide, well, middle and high school.
yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else on that? All right, that moves us into items by consensus.
Okay, Superintendent, I recommend the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Amanda, is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Lori, all those in favor? Aye. And that is unanimous and so moved. That moves us then into adjournment. Would somebody like to make a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Motion by Lori, is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Amanda, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? I didn't hear Susan. You want to adjourn?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we are adjourned at 10:07. Our next meeting is at the Hopkins Project Public Forum, which will be on April 3rd here at HCAMP. And then our regular meeting on April 4th, and then another regular meeting on the 25th. Thank you all for hanging in with us, and have a good night.
Carol, did you break down the number of people who, like, in particular day,